Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Officer Michael Thompson, badge number 48447, and I've been with the California Highway Patrol for 15 years. I've worked everything from routine traffic enforcement on Interstate 5 to high-speed pursuits through the Grapevine. But nothing in my career prepared me for what happened on the night of October 14th, 2019, during what should have been a routine prisoner transport in California's Central Valley. I need to start this story by explaining a bit about my background, because it's important you understand I'm not the type of officer who makes up stories or embellishes reports. I grew up in Fresno, graduated from Fresno State with a degree in criminal justice, and joined CHP right out of college in 2004. My father had been a Fresno Police Department sergeant for 23 years before retiring, and law enforcement was always something I felt called to do. My training officer, Sergeant Patricia Williams, was a 30-year veteran who had seen everything California highways could throw at an officer. She always told us recruits that in this job, you see everything twice. Once when it happens, and once when you're writing the report. She emphasized accuracy, attention to detail, and following procedure to the letter. The moment you start cutting corners or embellishing details, she would say during our training rides, is the moment you lose credibility with the courts, with your supervisors, and most importantly with yourself. Those lessons stuck with me throughout my career. I've always prided myself on thorough, accurate reports and consistent adherence to CHP protocols. In 15 years of service, I've never had a complaint about report accuracy or procedural violations. My performance evaluations consistently rate me as exceeds expectations in areas of professionalism, attention to detail, and adherence to policy. I mention this because what I'm about to tell you is so far outside the realm of normal experience that I need you to understand I'm not someone who fantasizes or exaggerates. My career with CHP has been steady and unremarkable in the best possible way. I've worked traffic enforcement on Interstate 5 through the Central Valley, Highway 99 from Bakersfield to Fresno, and various state routes throughout Kern, Tulare, and Fresno counties. I've handled everything from routine speeding citations to major traffic accidents, DUI arrests, vehicle pursuits, and emergency medical responses. I've testified in court hundreds of times, always maintaining my reputation for factual, detailed testimony. I've been married to my wife Jennifer for 12 years. She's a nurse at Community Regional Medical Center in Fresno, working in the emergency department. We have 2 children, Emma, age 10, and Jake, age 8. I coach Jake's Little League team and help Emma with her homework every night when I'm not working. I'm active in our church, serve on the Neighborhood Watch Committee, and volunteer with the local youth programs. I say this not to brag, but to establish that I'm a stable, grounded person with strong community ties and no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or stress-related problems. The incident I'm about to describe happened during what should have been a routine night shift. I typically work 4 10-hour shifts per week, usually Tuesday through Friday, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. This schedule allows me to be home when the kids get back from school and spend time with the family before heading to work. On October 14th, 2019, I was working my normal Thursday night shift, assigned to Transport Unit 7 Adam 23. Let me explain the Transport Unit assignment, because it becomes crucial to understanding what happened. CHP operates several specialized transport vehicles designed specifically for moving prisoners between facilities. These units are modified Crown Victoria police interceptors with reinforced rear compartments, specialized restraint systems, and enhanced security features. Transport Unit 7-Adam-23 was a 2018 model that had been in service for about 18 months. The vehicle's rear compartment was completely separated from the front by a thick plexiglass barrier with small ventilation slots and a communication window that could be opened or closed from the driver's position. The rear doors had no interior handles and could only be opened from outside with a special key. The windows were made of reinforced glass that couldn't be broken from the inside. The rear seat was bolted to the floor and equipped with multiple restraint points for securing prisoners during transport. All transport vehicles are equipped with GPS tracking systems that report location, speed, and route information to CHP dispatch every 30 seconds. They also have digital video recording systems with cameras covering both the front and rear compartments. The recording systems operate continuously during transport assignments and store footage for 30 days before being overwritten. On October 14th, I reported for duty at 6 p.m. and received my assignment during the shift briefing. Sergeant Robert Davis conducted the briefing for 6 officers working various assignments throughout Kern County. My specific assignment was to transport 2 federal prisoners from the Kern County Sheriff's Department Detention Facility in Bakersfield to the California Department of Corrections Reception Center in Wasco. The transport was scheduled to begin at 10:30 p.m., giving me 4 hours to conduct routine highway patrol before the pickup. This was a standard procedure. Transport assignments were typically scheduled for later in the evening to minimize traffic and reduce security risks. During the intervening hours, I patrolled Highway 99 between Bakersfield and Delano, conducting speed enforcement and responding to 2 minor traffic accidents. At 9:45 p.m., I received radio instructions to proceed to the Kern County Detention Facility for prisoner pickup. The facility is located on Norris Road in Bakersfield, about 15 minutes from my patrol area. I arrived at 10:05 p.m. and began the standard prisoner transfer procedures. The first prisoner was Anthony Martinez, a 34-year-old Hispanic male from Los Angeles. Martinez had been arrested 3 days earlier during a traffic stop on Highway 58 near Tehachapi. CHP officers had discovered approximately 2 pounds of crystal methamphetamine hidden in his vehicle's spare tire compartment. He was being charged with possession with intent to distribute, transportation of controlled substances, and several related federal charges. Martinez was about 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighing approximately 160 pounds, with short black hair and numerous tattoos covering his arms, neck, and hands. The tattoos appeared to be gang-related, though I'm not an expert in gang identification. During the booking process, Martinez had been cooperative but largely silent. His booking photo showed a thin face with prominent cheekbones and dark eyes that seemed to look directly through the camera. The second prisoner was David Kim, a 28-year-old Korean-American male from Stockton. Kim had been arrested at a truck stop on Interstate 5 near Grapevine after a routine commercial vehicle inspection revealed 73 kilograms of cocaine hidden in his semi-trailer. He was being charged with drug trafficking, transportation of controlled substances across state lines, and conspiracy charges related to what appeared to be a larger smuggling operation. Kim was significantly larger than Martinez, approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall and 220 pounds, with short black hair and a distinctive scar running from his left ear to his jawline. According to his arrest report, Kim claimed to be an independent truck driver who had no knowledge of the drugs in his trailer. He maintained that he had picked up the sealed cargo containers in Fresno and was delivering them to a warehouse in Los Angeles. Unlike Martinez, Kim had been vocal during his arrest and booking, insisting on his innocence and demanding to speak with an attorney. The prisoner transfer process took approximately 25 minutes. Each prisoner was searched again before being placed in the transport vehicle, even though they had already been searched multiple times during the booking process. This redundant searching is standard procedure designed to ensure that no contraband makes it into the transport vehicle. Both prisoners were secured with standard CHP transport restraints. These consist of handcuffs behind the back, connected to a belly chain around the waist, with ankle shackles that allow for small steps but prevent running. The restraints are designed to allow prisoners to sit comfortably during transport while preventing any possibility of escape or violence. Martinez was placed on the right side of the rear seat, Kim on the left. Both were secured to the seat using additional restraint points built into the vehicle. I conducted a final security check of the rear compartment, confirmed that all locks were functioning properly, and verified that the video recording system was operating normally. At 10:30 p.m., I departed the Kern County Detention Facility with both prisoners secured in the rear compartment. The drive to Wasco normally takes about 45 minutes via Highway 99 North, depending on traffic conditions. At that time of night, traffic is typically light, and I expected to arrive at the reception center by approximately 11:15 p.m. The route from Bakersfield to Wasco via Highway 99 is one I've driven hundreds of times over my career. It's a straight shot north through the heart of the Central Valley, passing through agricultural land, small farming communities, and occasional commercial areas. Mile markers along the route are clearly posted, and there are several recognizable landmarks including agricultural inspection stations, truck stops, and highway rest areas. For the first 15 minutes of the transport, everything proceeded normally. Both prisoners were quiet. The vehicle's systems were functioning properly, and radio communications with CHP dispatch were clear and consistent. I maintained a speed of 65 miles per hour in the right lane, following standard transport procedures. At 10:45 p.m., I noticed weather conditions beginning to change. Looking west toward the coastal mountains, I could see what appeared to be fog forming in the distance. Central Valley fog is a well-known phenomenon, particularly during autumn months when temperature differentials between warm ground and cooling air create ideal conditions for dense fog formation. This fog can be extremely dangerous for drivers. It often forms rapidly and can reduce visibility to near zero in a matter of minutes. CHP officers are trained to exercise extreme caution when fog conditions are present, and transport operations are sometimes delayed or rerouted when fog becomes too dense. At 10:50 p.m., I radioed dispatch with a routine status update, as required every 15 minutes during prisoner transports. 7 Adam 23 to dispatch, northbound Highway 99, approaching mile marker 85, 2 prisoners secure, ETA Wasco, approximately 25 minutes. Copy 7, Adam 23, Weather Service advising possible fog formation throughout Central Valley tonight. Exercise appropriate caution. 7, Adam 23 copies fog advisory. The fog began rolling in from the west around 10:55 p.m. At first, it appeared as wispy tendrils crossing the highway, but within 5 minutes it had thickened considerably. By 11 p.m., visibility had dropped to approximately 100 feet, and I reduced speed to 45 miles per hour while activating the vehicle's emergency flashers. It was during this period of reduced visibility that I first noticed unusual behavior from the prisoners. Martinez, who had been quietly staring out the window since departure, suddenly became more alert and began looking around the rear compartment as if searching for something. Kim, who had been resting, with his eyes closed, opened them and began watching Martinez with an expression of concern. At 11:05 p.m., Martinez spoke for the first time since being placed in the transport vehicle. "Officer," he said, speaking through the communication slot, "where exactly are we going?" "You're being transported to the Department of Corrections Reception Center in Wasco for processing," I replied, which was the standard response to such questions. "No," Martinez said, his voice carrying a strange tone of certainty. "I mean, where are we really going?" I found this question odd, but not necessarily alarming. Prisoners often ask questions about their destination, sometimes as a way to gauge travel time, or sometimes as a prelude to escape attempts. I had been trained to provide only basic, factual information in response to such questions. "Your destination is the reception center in Wasco," I repeated. Martinez was quiet for a moment, then said, "Officer, you need to pay attention to where we are. Something isn't right." Before I could respond, Kim spoke up. "He's right, officer. We've been driving longer than we should have." I glanced at the dashboard clock, 11:05 p.m. We had been driving for 35 minutes, which was within the normal range for the journey to Wasco, especially given the reduced speed due to fog conditions. "We're on schedule," I said. "Check your odometer," Kim said. "How many miles have we traveled since Bakersfield?" I looked at the trip odometer, which I had reset at the beginning of the transport. It showed 47 miles, which seemed about right for the distance we should have covered. "Officer," Martinez said, "do you recognize any landmarks? Any mile markers or exit signs?" I realized that I hadn't seen any mile markers for several minutes, which was unusual. Highway 99 has mile markers posted at regular intervals, and even in fog, they're usually visible with headlights. "The fog is affecting visibility," I said. "It's more than that," Kim said. "We've passed the same truck 3 times now." I looked ahead and could see the taillights of a large truck about a quarter mile in front of us. In the fog, it was impossible to make out any identifying details. "You're trying to disorient me," I said, recognizing what I thought was a common prisoner transport manipulation tactic. "Officer," Martinez said, "I understand why you'd think that, but we're all in the same situation here. Something strange is happening." The fog continued to thicken, and by 11:10 p.m. visibility was down to about 30 feet. I reduced speed further to 30 miles per hour, and was now relying almost entirely on the yellow highway center line to maintain my position on the road. At 11:15 p.m., I attempted to radio dispatch for a status update. 7 Adam 23 to dispatch, current position mile marker approximately 92, heavy fog conditions, reduced speed, ETA Wasco approximately 15 minutes. The response came back immediately. 7 Adam 23, showing your location as mile marker 78, southbound Highway 99. I was confused by this response. According to my calculations, we should have been north of mile marker 90, and we were definitely traveling northbound, not southbound. Dispatch, 7 Adam 23, please verify. I show northbound travel, current position north of mile marker 90. 7 Adam 23, GPS tracking shows your vehicle at mile marker 78, traveling southbound at approximately 30 miles per hour. This made no sense. I was certain we were traveling north, as we had been since departing Bakersfield. I checked the vehicle's compass, which confirmed northbound travel. Dispatch, 7 Adam 23, vehicle compass confirms northbound travel. Request GPS verification. There was a pause before dispatch responded. 7 Adam 23, GPS system shows consistent southbound travel for the past 15 minutes. Are you experiencing equipment malfunctions? I looked at the vehicle's GPS display on the dashboard. The screen showed our position. but the fog made it difficult to see clearly. What I could make out seemed to indicate that we were indeed south of our expected position. 7 Adam 23. Possible GPS malfunction. Continuing to destination based on highway markers and compass bearing. Copy 7 Adam 23. Advise if you need assistance. Kim spoke up from the rear compartment. Officer, what did dispatch say about our location? I hesitated before answering. They're showing a different position than I expected. How different? Martinez asked. They think we're further south than we should be. Both prisoners were quiet for a moment. Then Kim said, Officer, I think we need to pull over and figure out where we are. That's not protocol, I said. Officer, Martinez said, forget protocol for a minute. Something is wrong here. We've all noticed it. I had been trained never to stop during a prisoner transport except for emergencies or at designated facilities. Stopping on the highway, especially in fog conditions, would violate multiple security protocols. But the discrepancy between my observations and dispatch's GPS reading was troubling. I decided to continue until I could see a mile marker or exit sign that would confirm our location. For the next 10 minutes, I drove through increasingly thick fog, watching for any landmark that would help determine our position. The truck ahead of us remained visible as 2 red taillights, but I couldn't make out any other details. At 11:25 p.m., I finally saw a green highway sign emerging from the fog ahead. As I got closer, I could make out the text, Bakersfield 8 miles. This was impossible. We had left Bakersfield nearly an hour ago and had been traveling north the entire time. Even accounting for reduced speed due to fog, we should have been approaching Wasco, not returning to Bakersfield. I immediately pulled over to the shoulder and activated the vehicle's emergency flashers. My hands were shaking as I reached for the radio microphone. 7 Adam 23 to dispatch emergency, requesting immediate assistance. Static. The radio was producing nothing but white noise. 7 Adam 23 to any unit, emergency, please respond. More static. I checked the radio's indicators. All systems appeared to be functioning normally, but I couldn't raise anyone. Officer, Kim said from the rear compartment. What's wrong? I can't reach dispatch, I said, and according to the highway signs, we're somehow back near Bakersfield. Both prisoners were quiet for a moment. Then Martinez said, Officer, we need to work together here. Something is happening that none of us understand. I sat in the driver's seat, trying to process the situation. According to the highway sign, we were 8 miles from Bakersfield, but we had been driving north from that city for nearly an hour. The radio wasn't working, GPS readings were inconsistent, and I was lost in fog that seemed to be getting thicker rather than clearing. I stepped out of the vehicle to check our surroundings and try to get a better sense of our location. The fog was so dense that I could barely see the front of the transport vehicle from the driver's door. The air was thick and damp, with an unusual smell I couldn't identify. Not the typical agricultural smells of the Central Valley, but something organic and slightly unpleasant, like decomposing vegetation. I walked to the front of the vehicle and checked the GPS unit mounted on the dashboard from outside. The display showed our coordinates as 35.2847 north, 119.0156 west, which would place us approximately 8 miles north of Bakersfield, exactly where the highway sign indicated. But this was impossible. We had been driving continuously north for nearly an hour. Even at reduced speed, we should have covered at least 30 miles, which would have put us well past Wasco. I returned to the driver's seat and tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. I checked my cell phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual in some parts of the Central Valley, but concerning given our situation. Officer, Martinez called through the communication slot. "What did you find?" "The GPS confirms we're near Bakersfield," I said. "But I don't understand how that's possible." "Officer," Kim said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. I've driven this route hundreds of times in my truck. I know every mile marker, every exit, every landmark. We've been driving in some kind of circle." "That's impossible," I said, but even as I spoke, I was beginning to doubt my own certainty. "Check your fuel gauge," Martinez said. I looked at the fuel indicator and felt my stomach drop. The gauge showed approximately 1/8 of a tank remaining. At the beginning of my shift, the vehicle had been fully fueled, and a transport to Wasco should have used no more than a quarter tank. "How long do you think we've been driving?" Kim asked. I looked at the dashboard clock. 11:30 p.m. According to the time, we had been driving for exactly 1 hour, but my fuel consumption suggested we had been driving much longer. 1 hour, I said. "Officer," Martinez said, "look at your watch." I looked at my wristwatch, 11:30 p.m. The time matched the dashboard clock. "Now look at the trip odometer." The trip odometer showed 73 miles, which was nearly double what it should have shown for a 1-hour drive to Wasco. "Something is wrong with the vehicle's systems," I said, but I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. "Officer," Kim said, "we need to get out of this fog. Do you see any exit ramps or facilities where we can stop?" I looked ahead into the fog but could see nothing except the yellow highway lines disappearing into white haze. "I can't see any exits." "There should be an agricultural inspection station coming up," Kim said. "It's always lit even at night. If we can get there, they might have working communications equipment." I put the vehicle back in drive and continued north, now watching carefully for any signs of the inspection station Kim had mentioned. The fog remained impossibly thick, and visibility was still limited to about 30 feet. At 11:45 p.m., I saw lights ahead. Not the red taillights of the truck we had been following, but bright white lights indicating some kind of facility. As we got closer, I could see it was indeed a California Department of Food and Agriculture inspection station. I pulled into the facility's parking area and immediately saw an inspector coming out of the main building. He was a middle-aged Hispanic man with gray hair, wearing the standard CDFA uniform. "Officer Thompson," he said, reading my name tag as I approached. "I'm Inspector James Rodriguez. We got a call that you might be coming this way." This confused me. A call from whom? "CHP dispatch called about 30 minutes ago. They said you were having communication problems during a prisoner transport and might need assistance." This made no sense. I hadn't been able to reach dispatch for over 30 minutes, so how could they have called ahead to the inspection station? "Inspector Rodriguez, I need to use your communications equipment. I've been unable to reach dispatch and I'm having navigation issues." "Of course, come inside." I followed Rodriguez into the inspection station office, a small building with various communications equipment, computers, and monitoring systems. He led me to a radio unit that he said connected directly to CHP dispatch. "Dispatch, this is 7 Adam 23 requesting emergency assistance." The response was immediate and clear. 7 Adam 23, we've been trying to reach you for over an hour. What's your current status?" I was relieved to finally have clear radio contact. "Dispatch, I've been experiencing radio communications failure and GPS navigation anomalies during prisoner transport. Currently at Agricultural Inspection Station mile marker 94 on Highway 99. Copy 7 Adam 23. Our records show your vehicle has been stationary at that location for the past 2 hours. My relief quickly turned to confusion. "Dispatch, that's incorrect. I've been driving continuously since departing Bakersfield at 22:30 hours. 7 Adam, 23. GPS tracking shows your vehicle arrived at mile marker 94 at 21:45 hours and has remained stationary since that time. Are you experiencing medical difficulties or equipment malfunctions? I looked at Inspector Rodriguez, who was listening to the conversation with a concerned expression. Dispatch, I need immediate backup and supervisor response to my location. I have 2 federal prisoners in transport and am experiencing significant unexplained technical problems. Copy 7 Adam 23. Units en route. ETA 12 minutes. I handed the microphone back to Rodriguez and walked outside to check on the transport vehicle. Both prisoners were still secured in the rear compartment, but they looked agitated. "Officer," Martinez called out as I approached, "we need to talk to you immediately." I opened the communication slot. "What is it?" "How long were you inside that building?" Kim asked. I looked at my watch. It was 12:02 a.m. I had been inside the inspection station for approximately 10 minutes. "About 10 minutes, why?" Martinez and Kim looked at each other with expressions of alarm. "Officer," Martinez said slowly, "you've been gone for over 90 minutes. I stared at them through the rearview mirror. "That's impossible." "Look at your watch again," Kim said. "Then look at the dashboard clock." I looked at my wristwatch, 12:02 a.m. The dashboard clock also read 12:02 a.m., but I clearly remembered entering the inspection station at approximately 11:45 p.m. "You're both lying," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Officer," Martinez said, "we're all experiencing the same thing. Time isn't working the way it should. Distance isn't working the way it should. We need to figure out what's happening." Before I could respond, I saw headlights approaching through the fog. As they got closer, I could make out the emergency light bars of multiple CHP vehicles. 3 patrol cars pulled into the inspection station parking area. Sergeant Patricia Williams, my former training officer, stepped out of the lead vehicle and walked toward me. "Thompson," she called as she approached, "what's your situation?" I began explaining the events of the past several hours, the navigation problems, radio failures, inconsistent GPS readings, and time discrepancies. As I spoke, I could see Sergeant Williams' expression growing more concerned. "Thompson," she said when I finished, "I need you to listen carefully. We received your initial departure notification at 22:30 hours. According to our records, you never reached the first checkpoint, and we lost GPS contact with your vehicle at 21:45 hours. We've been searching for you for over 4 hours." "Sergeant, that's impossible. I've been driving continuously and have been in intermittent radio contact." Sergeant Williams walked over to the transport vehicle and looked through the rear window at the prisoners. "Thompson, can you identify these suspects for me?" "Anthony Martinez and David Kim, federal prisoners being transported to Wasco for processing." Sergeant Williams returned to her patrol car and retrieved a file folder. She opened it and showed me 2 sets of booking photos and documentation. "Thompson, I need you to look at these carefully." The first set of photos showed Anthony Martinez, exactly as I remembered him. The thin face, prominent cheekbones, and extensive tattoos. The second set showed David Kim, but the man in these photos was noticeably older than the person sitting in my transport vehicle. The booking photos showed a man with gray hair, deeper facial lines, and a more weathered appearance. "Sergeant, this photo doesn't match my prisoner." "Thompson, according to federal records, David Kim died in a traffic accident on Interstate 5 in 2021. These booking photos are from his 2018 arrest." I looked back at the transport vehicle. The man I knew as David Kim was sitting in the rear seat, very much alive, watching our conversation through the window. "That's impossible, Sergeant. He's right there." Sergeant Williams followed my gaze to the transport vehicle. She walked over and looked through the rear window, studying the occupants for several seconds. "Thompson, I need you to open the rear compartment." With trembling hands, I unlocked the rear doors of the transport vehicle and pulled them open. The rear compartment was completely empty. No prisoners, no restraints, no evidence that anyone had been transported. The rear seat showed no indentations, no signs of occupancy, nothing to indicate that anyone had been sitting there. "Thompson," Sergeant Williams said quietly, "there's no one in your vehicle." I stared into the empty rear compartment, unable to process what I was seeing. Moments before, both Martinez and Kim had been sitting there, secured in their restraints, participating in conversations with me. "Sergeant, I don't understand what's happening." "Thompson, we're going to get you evaluated by medical personnel. Officer Martinez will drive your transport vehicle back to the station, and you're going to ride with me." As we walked toward Sergeant Williams' patrol car, Inspector Rodriguez called out from the inspection station building. "Sergeant Williams, I need to speak with you about something." We returned to the inspection station where Rodriguez was standing with a confused expression. "Sergeant, there's something strange here. Officer Thompson came inside about an hour ago to use our radio equipment, but when I went to get him some coffee, I couldn't find him anywhere. The building was empty, and his transport vehicle was gone from the parking lot. I was about to call it in when you arrived." Sergeant Williams looked at me, then back at Rodriguez. "Inspector, Officer Thompson has been outside with us for the past 30 minutes. "That's impossible, Sergeant. 30 minutes ago, I was alone in the building, wondering where Officer Thompson had disappeared to." I felt a chill run down my spine. According to Rodriguez, I had vanished from inside the inspection station. According to Sergeant Williams, I had been outside the entire time. According to my own memory, I had been inside for only a few minutes. "Inspector," I said, "do you have security cameras in the facility?" "Yes, we have cameras covering all the main areas." "Can we review the footage from the past 2 hours?" Rodriguez nodded and led us to a small office with a computer monitor displaying multiple camera feeds from inside and outside the inspection station. "Let me bring up the footage from when you arrived," Rodriguez said, working the computer controls. On the screen, I could see my transport vehicle entering the parking lot at 11:45 p.m. The timestamp was clearly visible. I watched myself getting out of the vehicle and walking toward the inspection station building. Rodriguez came out to meet me, and we both entered the building together. "There," I said, pointing at the screen. That's when I came inside to use the radio. Rodriguez fast-forwarded the footage. On screen, I could see him leading me to the radio equipment, then walking away to get coffee. But instead of remaining at the radio, the figure on the screen, me, simply disappeared. One moment I was standing at the radio unit, the next moment the room was empty. "How is that possible?" I asked. Rodriguez continued fast-forwarding. The footage showed him returning with coffee, looking puzzled at the empty room, then searching the entire building. Meanwhile, the external camera showed my transport vehicle sitting empty in the parking lot. Then, at 12:02 a.m., exactly when I remembered coming back outside, the external camera showed me suddenly appearing next to the transport vehicle, as if I had materialized from nowhere. "This doesn't make sense," Sergeant Williams said. We continued reviewing the footage, but it raised more questions than it answered. According to the security cameras, I had been alone in the transport vehicle the entire time. There was no evidence of any prisoners, no recorded conversations, no interactions with anyone except Inspector Rodriguez. but I could clearly remember every detail of my conversations with Martinez and Kim. I could remember their faces, their voices, their specific comments about the route and our location. I could remember Kim's scar, Martinez's tattoos, their expressions of concern about our situation. "Thompson," Sergeant Williams said finally, "I think we need to get you to a medical facility for evaluation." I wanted to protest, but the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the empty transport vehicle, the discrepancies in time and location. Something had clearly gone wrong, either with my perception of events or with reality itself. As we prepared to leave the inspection station, I took one final look at the transport vehicle. On the rear seat, I could still see what appeared to be slight indentations in the upholstery where Martinez and Kim had been sitting. But when I pointed this out to Sergeant Williams, she saw nothing unusual. The ride back to the CHP station was conducted in complete silence. Sergeant Williams periodically glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and I could see the concern in her expression. I spent the time trying to make sense of what had happened, but every explanation I could think of seemed impossible. At the station, I was debriefed by Captain Robert Davis, a 25-year veteran who had seen every conceivable situation that CHP officers could encounter. I recounted the events of the night in complete detail, from the initial prisoner pickup through the discovery of the empty transport vehicle. Captain Davis listened without interruption, taking detailed notes throughout my statement. When I finished, he was quiet for several minutes, reviewing his notes. "Thompson," he said finally, "I've reviewed your service record. 15 years of exemplary service. No disciplinary issues. No substance abuse problems. No mental health concerns. You're one of our most reliable officers. That's what makes this situation so difficult to understand." He opened a file folder and removed several documents. "I've contacted the Kern County Sheriff's Department about your transport assignment tonight. According to their records, no federal prisoner transport was scheduled. Anthony Martinez was released on bail 2 days ago, and his case is still pending in federal court. As for David Kim, federal records confirm that he died in a traffic accident in 2021. I stared at Captain Davis, trying to process this information. "Captain, if there was no transport scheduled, then why was I assigned to Transport Unit 7, Atom 23? Captain Davis checked his notes. "According to our duty roster, you were assigned to routine highway patrol on Interstate 5 tonight. There's no record of any transport assignment." The room seemed to spin around me. Every detail of the transport assignment had been crystal clear in my memory. The shift briefing, the prisoner documentation, the security procedures, the drive to pick up the suspects. But according to official records, none of it had happened. "Captain, I need to examine the transport vehicle." We walked out to the motor pool where Transport Unit 7 Atom 23 was parked. Captain Davis unlocked the rear compartment, and we both looked inside carefully. The rear seat showed clear signs of recent use. Definite indentations in the upholstery, scuff marks on the floor, and what appeared to be a small tear in the fabric that I didn't remember seeing before the transport. "Someone was definitely back there," I said. Captain Davis examined the interior closely, running his hands over the seat surfaces and checking for any physical evidence. "Thompson, according to our maintenance logs, this vehicle hasn't been used for a transport in over 10 days. It was scheduled for routine maintenance and has been sitting in the motor pool." But as he spoke, I noticed something else. On the floor of the rear compartment, partially hidden under the seat, was a small piece of folded paper. I picked it up and unfolded it carefully. It was a handwritten note, in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Officer Thompson, thank you for the ride tonight. We're sorry for the confusion and the fear we may have caused. Some journeys take much longer than expected, and some passengers aren't what they seem to be. The fog makes many things possible that shouldn't be possible. We hope you understand that what happened tonight was necessary, even if we can't explain why. Be careful on Highway 99 during fog conditions. Not all transports reach their intended destinations. AM and DK. I showed the note to Captain Davis. He read it several times, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Thompson, I think you need to take some administrative leave while we sort this out. I was placed on paid administrative leave pending a comprehensive psychological evaluation. CHP policy requires any officer experiencing unexplained perceptual episodes to be cleared by a mental health professional before returning to active duty. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the department's consulting psychologist, conducted 5 extensive interviews with me over the following 2 weeks. I recounted the events of October 14th multiple times, and my story remained consistent in every detail across all sessions. Dr. Mitchell was a woman in her mid-50s with 23 years of experience evaluating law enforcement personnel. She had a PhD in clinical psychology from UCLA and specialized in stress-related disorders, post-traumatic stress, and unusual perceptual experiences among first responders. Her office was located in a professional building about 10 minutes from CHP headquarters, and it had the comfortable, non-threatening atmosphere typical of psychological counseling facilities. During our first session, Dr. Mitchell explained that she had already reviewed my complete service record, medical history, and the incident reports from October 14th. She had also spoken with Sergeant Williams, Captain Davis, and Inspector Rodriguez to get their perspectives on what had occurred. Officer Thompson, she said during our initial session, I want you to understand that my role here isn't to determine whether your account is true or false. My job is to assess your mental state and determine whether you're fit to return to duty. She explained that CHP had protocols for dealing with officers who experienced unusual incidents that couldn't be easily explained. Sometimes these incidents were stress-related. Sometimes they involved medical conditions that affected perception. And sometimes they involved circumstances that simply fell outside normal experience. I've been doing this for over 20 years, Dr. Mitchell said, and I've evaluated officers who have experienced everything from severe post-traumatic stress reactions to complex hallucinations to what can only be described as genuinely unexplained phenomena. Over the course of our sessions, Dr. Mitchell had me recount the events of October 14th in minute detail. She asked about specific conversations, exact times, physical descriptions of the prisoners, details about the transport vehicle, and my emotional state throughout the experience. What struck her as unusual, she explained, was the consistency and specificity of my account. In cases involving stress-related hallucinations or psychological breaks, details typically change between tellings. Patients often add new elements or forget previously mentioned details. Your account has remained remarkably consistent. She also noted the physical evidence that corroborated parts of my story. The indentations in the transport vehicle's rear seat are real. The tear in the upholstery shows signs of recent stress. The handwritten note, while we can't verify its origin, contains details that weren't included in any of the official reports. During our third session, Dr. Mitchell showed me a thick file folder she had been keeping on my case. Officer Thompson, I've been in contact with colleagues in other states who specialize in unusual law enforcement incidents. What you experienced isn't entirely unique. She opened the folder and showed me copies of incident reports from various police departments across the country. Reports of officers who had experienced temporal anomalies during routine patrols, cases of prisoners who appeared in transport vehicles but had no corresponding arrest records. incidents of officers who found themselves in locations they couldn't have reached through normal travel. Most departments handle these cases quietly, Dr. Mitchell explained. They're difficult to investigate, impossible to prove, and they tend to damage the credibility of the officers involved. Usually, the officers are given psychological evaluations, placed on administrative leave, and eventually transferred to different assignments or encouraged to retire. She showed me one report from a Texas Department of Public Safety trooper who had transported a prisoner for over 6 hours, only to discover that the prisoner had been dead for 3 years. Another report described a Nevada Highway Patrol officer who had conducted a routine traffic stop that lasted 15 minutes according to his watch, but 4 hours according to dispatch records. The common elements in these cases, Dr. Mitchell said, are temporal distortions, encounters with individuals who shouldn't exist, communication failures, and physical evidence that partially supports the officer's accounts but contradicts official records. During our 4th session, Dr. Mitchell asked me about my family background, particularly whether anyone in my family had experienced unusual phenomena. Actually, I said, my grandfather used to tell stories about the strange things that happened when he was driving trucks through the Central Valley in the 1960s and 70s. My family always assumed he was just telling tall tales. I explained that my grandfather, Frank Thompson, had been a long-haul truck driver for 35 years. He used to tell stories about fog that appeared suddenly on clear nights, about seeing lights that followed his truck for miles, and about occasionally arriving at destinations hours earlier or later than his logbooks indicated. He always said there were certain stretches of highway that didn't follow normal rules, I told Dr. Mitchell. He claimed that Highway 99 between Bakersfield and Fresno was particularly strange, especially during October and November when fog conditions were common. Dr. Mitchell made extensive notes about my grandfather's experiences. Generational patterns aren't uncommon in cases like this, she said. Sometimes sensitivity to unusual phenomena appears to run in families. During our final session, Dr. Mitchell presented me with her conclusions. Officer Thompson, I don't believe you experienced a psychotic episode, a stress-related breakdown, or any form of mental illness. Your psychological testing results are completely normal, your stress indicators are within acceptable ranges, and your cognitive functioning shows no impairments. She leaned forward in her chair. I think you experienced something genuinely anomalous that we don't have a scientific framework to understand fully. Dr. Mitchell explained that her recommendation would be to return me to active duty with some restrictions. I'm going to recommend that you avoid solo assignments for the first month back, and that you be temporarily reassigned away from Highway 99 and other Central Valley routes where your grandfather reported similar phenomena. She also gave me some advice about coping with unusual experiences. If something like this happens again, document everything immediately. Take photographs if possible, record exact times and locations, and try to find independent witnesses. The more evidence you can gather, the better protected you'll be professionally. Captain Davis approved Dr. Mitchell's recommendations, and I returned to active duty on November 8, 2019. I was assigned to Interstate 5 patrol between Los Angeles and Bakersfield, avoiding the Central Valley routes where my experience had occurred. For the first few weeks back on duty, everything seemed normal. I worked routine traffic enforcement, responded to accidents and breakdowns, and conducted regular patrol activities without incident. My confidence began to return, and I started to wonder if the events of October 14th had been some kind of stress-related hallucination after all. But 3 weeks after returning to duty, I was assigned to a routine traffic stop that would prove my experience hadn't been an isolated incident. On November 29, 2019, I was working a day shift on Interstate 5 about 20 miles north of Los Angeles. It was a clear, sunny Friday afternoon with excellent visibility and moderate traffic. I was conducting routine speed enforcement when I clocked a silver Honda Civic traveling 84 miles per hour in a 65-mile-per-hour zone. I activated my emergency lights and initiated a traffic stop. The driver pulled over immediately and was waiting with his license and registration ready before I reached his window. This level of preparation was unusual, but not unprecedented. Some drivers anticipate what officers will ask for and have their documents ready. The driver was a Hispanic male, approximately 35 years old, with numerous tattoos on his arms and neck. His driver's license identified him as Anthony Martinez, with an address in Los Angeles. As I looked at the license, I felt a chill of recognition. This was unmistakably the same person I remembered from the October 14th transport. The same facial features, the same tattoos, the same general appearance. "Mr. Martinez," I said carefully, "have we met before?" He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. There was something knowing and slightly unsettling about his demeanor. "Officer Thompson, I was wondering when we'd run into each other again." The fact that he knew my name was alarming. I wasn't wearing a visible name tag, and I hadn't introduced myself. "How do you know my name?" "You gave me a ride a few weeks ago," Martinez said. "Me and my friend David, long drive through the fog." I felt my heart rate accelerate. According to official records, the October 14th transport had never happened. Martinez should have had no knowledge of it. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to step out of the vehicle." He complied without argument, but as he stood next to his car, he looked directly at me with the same expression I remembered from the transport vehicle. "Officer Thompson, you're still trying to figure out what happened that night, aren't you?" I reached for my radio to call for backup, but before I could key the microphone, Martinez continued speaking. "Don't bother calling for help. This conversation won't take long, and we're not going to have any problems." Despite his words, I activated my radio. 7 Adam 15 to dispatch, requesting backup for traffic stop. Interstate 5 northbound mile marker 127. The response was immediate static, the same white noise I had experienced during the October 14th incident. "Officer Thompson," Martinez said, leaning against his car in a casual posture. "You're starting to understand, aren't you? Some things don't follow the rules you learned at the academy." I kept my hand near my service weapon but didn't draw it. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to put your hands on the vehicle and face away from me." "I'm not going to resist," he said, but he didn't move to comply. "I just want to help you understand what happened that night." "According to official records, nothing happened that night," I said. "Dr. Mitchell concluded that I experienced some kind of stress-related incident." Martinez laughed, the same low chuckle I remembered from the transport vehicle. "Dr. Mitchell is a smart woman, but she's never driven through the fog on Highway 99 at midnight. She's never picked up passengers who aren't supposed to exist." The mention of Dr. Mitchell's name sent another chill through me. That information wasn't public, and I hadn't mentioned her name during this traffic stop. "How do you know about Dr. Mitchell?" "Officer Thompson, time isn't as linear as you think it is. Neither is space, neither is existence itself. That night in October, you drove through something that most people never experience. A gap in the normal fabric of reality." Before I could respond, I heard another vehicle approaching from behind. I turned to see a second silver Honda Civic pulling up behind my patrol car. The driver got out, an Asian male, approximately 30 years old, with a distinctive scar running from his left ear to his jawline. David Kim. "Officer Thompson," Kim said as he approached, "we need to finish our conversation." I drew my service weapon and pointed it at both men. "Both of you, hands where I can see them, get on the ground now." Neither man moved to comply, but neither showed any aggressive behavior. They simply stood there, watching me with expressions that seemed sympathetic rather than threatening. "Officer," Kim said quietly, "we're not here to hurt you. We're here to explain what really happened that night and why it's going to keep happening." "What do you mean, keep happening?" "The Central Valley has certain properties," Kim explained. "Geographic anomalies that most people never encounter because they don't drive the highways at the right times, under the right conditions. Time works differently in certain places," Martinez added. "The fog that night wasn't just weather. It was a manifestation of something deeper, a place where different timelines intersect. I was having trouble processing what they were telling me, but the evidence of my own senses was becoming impossible to deny. My radio wasn't working, just like on October 14th. These two men shouldn't exist according to official records. Yet here they were, knowing details about my experience that hadn't been made public. "You're both under arrest," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Officer Thompson," Martinez said gently, "look at your watch." I glanced at my wrist. The watch showed 2:30 p.m., which was approximately when I had initiated the traffic stop. "Now, look at your patrol car's dashboard clock." I looked through the driver's side window of my cruiser. The dashboard clock showed 11:47 p.m. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Check your fuel gauge," Kim suggested. I looked at the patrol car's fuel indicator. It showed nearly empty, despite having filled up at the beginning of my shift 6 hours earlier. "How is this possible?" "Because you've been driving for longer than you think," Kim explained. "And you're about to discover that this traffic stop isn't happening where, or when, you think it is." I looked around at the landscape surrounding us. It appeared to be the familiar scenery along Interstate 5, rolling hills, scattered oak trees, and distant mountains. But something seemed subtly different, though I couldn't identify exactly what. "Where are we?" "Interstate 5, Martinez said, "but not the Interstate 5 you know. You're experiencing what we experienced that night. Displacement in time and space." "I don't understand any of this." Kim walked closer, moving slowly so as not to appear threatening. "Officer Thompson, what's the last thing you clearly remember before initiating this traffic stop?" I thought back. I had been patrolling Interstate 5, conducting routine speed enforcement. I had clocked Martinez's Honda, exceeding the speed limit, and activated my emergency lights to initiate the stop. I was conducting speed enforcement. I clocked your vehicle doing 84 in a 65 zone. "And before that?" Martinez asked. "What do you remember about the beginning of your shift?" I tried to recall the start of my shift, but the memories seemed fuzzy and incomplete, like trying to remember a dream that was fading upon waking. I remember reporting for duty, the shift briefing. "What day is today?" Kim asked. I thought about it. "Friday, November 29th. "And what day did your shift start?" I couldn't answer. The memory felt incomplete, fragmented. "Officer Thompson," Martinez said gently, "you've been driving for 3 days straight. You haven't stopped, you haven't slept, you haven't eaten. You've been caught in the same temporal loop that we experienced that night in October." 3 days? I looked at my watch again. The date display showed December 2nd, but that seemed impossible. I clearly remembered starting my shift on November 29th. "The fog creates disruptions in normal space-time," Kim explained. "Pockets where the usual rules of physics don't apply. Most people drive through these areas without noticing anything unusual. But sometimes, under specific conditions, people get caught in temporal loops. Like you did on October 14th, Martinez added, and like you're experiencing now. I felt dizzy and disoriented. The landscape around us seemed to shimmer slightly, as if I was looking at it through water or heat waves. "This isn't real," I said. "It's real," Kim replied, "but it's not normal. You're experiencing a phenomenon that exists outside conventional understanding of reality. How do I get out of it?" The two men looked at each other, then back at me, with expressions of genuine concern. "We don't know for certain," Martinez said quietly. "We've been trying to figure that out ourselves for a long time." "What do you mean?" "Officer Thompson," Kim said, "we're not the same Martinez and Kim you transported in October. We're different versions from different times, different circumstances. The temporal anomaly pulls in people from various points along their personal timelines. The Martinez you transported in October was from 2016, Martinez explained. I'm from 2014, before my arrest. The Kim you knew died in 2021, but this version of him is from 2018. My head was spinning. This is insane. The fog appears at irregular intervals along certain stretches of California highways, Kim continued. It's been documented sporadically for decades, but most reports are dismissed as hallucinations, stress reactions, or equipment malfunctions. There are other officers who have experienced similar events, Martinez said. Most of them are told they had medical episodes or psychological breaks. Some are quietly transferred to different assignments. A few take early retirement. But you're still here, I pointed out. We're caught in the same kind of loop you are, Kim replied. We appear when the anomaly is active, we try to help people understand what's happening, then we disappear when the effect cycles. Are you real? We're as real as you are, Martinez said. But we exist in a state that doesn't conform to normal temporal boundaries. I looked around again. The landscape was definitely shimmering now, and I could see what appeared to be fog beginning to form at the horizon, despite the clear afternoon sky above us. It's starting again, Kim observed. What's starting? The next cycle, Martinez said. You're about to be pulled back into the temporal loop. I could feel panic rising in my chest. How do I stop it? We don't know, Kim said honestly. But we've learned that fighting it makes the experience worse and lasts longer. The more you resist what's happening, the longer you stay trapped. The key seems to be acceptance, Martinez added. Understanding that what you're experiencing is beyond normal comprehension, but not necessarily harmful. The fog was getting thicker, rolling across the landscape toward us, despite the fact that it had been a clear day moments before. I could feel the temperature dropping, and the air was taking on that same organic smell I remembered from October 14th. Officer Thompson, Kim said urgently. There's something important you need to know. This isn't the first time we've had this conversation with you. What do you mean? We've met you here before, Martinez explained, multiple times. You get caught in the loop, we try to explain what's happening, the fog resets everything, and it starts over. How many times? We've stopped counting, Kim said. But each time you remember a little more. Each time you're closer to understanding what you need to understand. The fog was now thick enough that I could barely see my patrol car, even though it was only 30 feet away. What am I supposed to understand? That reality is more flexible than you've been taught, Martinez said. That time and space can be manipulated under certain conditions. That there are places where the normal rules simply don't apply. The Central Valley has always been strange, Kim added. Native American tribes knew about certain areas they avoided during specific times of year. Early settlers reported inexplicable phenomena. Even today, there are experienced truck drivers who refuse to travel certain routes at night. I could no longer see either of their vehicles. The fog had become so thick that we seemed to be standing in a white void, disconnected from any recognizable reality. What happens now? Now you drive, Martinez said. You get back in your patrol car and you drive through the fog. Eventually, you'll emerge somewhere else. Someone else. And then? Then it starts over, Kim said. Until you learn what you need to learn. Which is what? We don't know, Martinez admitted. That's something you have to discover yourself. But we think it has something to do with accepting that the universe is stranger and more complex than most people realize. I could barely see them now. They were becoming shadowy figures in the white haze. Officer Thompson, Kim's voice seemed to come from far away. Remember that not everything can be explained by procedures and protocols. Sometimes you have to trust your experience, even when it contradicts everything you've been taught. The next time we meet, Martinez's voice was fading. Try to remember this conversation. Try to remember that you've been here before, and that each time brings you closer to understanding. Their voices disappeared entirely, leaving me alone in the fog. I stumbled back toward where I thought my patrol car was parked, but I couldn't find it. I called out, but heard no response except the sound of my own voice being absorbed by the thick white haze. I walked in what I hoped was the right direction, but the fog was so dense I couldn't see my own feet. The ground beneath me felt solid enough, but everything else seemed insubstantial, dreamlike. After what felt like hours of walking through the white void, I saw a faint light ahead. As I got closer, I could make out the familiar shape of a CHP patrol car with its emergency lights flashing. But as I approached, I realized it wasn't my assigned vehicle. It was Transport Unit 7, Atom 23. I opened the driver's door and got in. The keys were in the ignition, and the radio was crackling with static. According to the dashboard clock, it was 10:47 p.m. on October 14th, 2019. I was back at the beginning of my original experience. In the rearview mirror, I could see two figures in the back seat. Anthony Martinez and David Kim, secured in their transport restraints, watching me with the same knowing expressions I remembered from before. "Hello again, Officer Thompson," Martinez said quietly. "Ready for another ride?" Kim asked. I put the vehicle in drive and began traveling north on Highway 99, knowing that I was about to experience the same impossible journey I had lived through multiple times before. But this time, I was beginning to understand that the journey itself might be the point. The fog closed in around us, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the faint sound of sirens, other officers, other transports, other loops in the endless cycle of Highway 99's temporal anomaly. As we drove deeper into the white haze, Martinez leaned forward and asked the same question he had asked before. "Officer Thompson, do you know where you're really taking us?" And for the first time across all these cycles, I thought I might have an answer. But as I opened my mouth to respond, the fog swallowed everything, and another cycle began. Over the following months, I began to piece together fragments of understanding about what was happening to me. Between the loops, during brief periods of normal reality, I started researching the history of unexplained phenomena along California highways. What I discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. Reports of temporal anomalies, spatial distortions, and encounters with impossible individuals stretched back over a century. Native American oral histories described certain areas of the Central Valley as places where time flows differently. Spanish colonial records mention soldiers who disappeared for days while traveling between missions, only to return with no memory of the lost time. In the 1930s, during the construction of the modern highway system, several construction workers reported experiencing time skips while working on certain sections of Highway 99. During the 1940s and 50s, there were numerous reports from truck drivers about ghost loads, cargo that would disappear from their trailers during overnight trips through the Central Valley. More recently, I found scattered reports buried in various law enforcement databases, cases that had been classified as equipment malfunctions or stress-related incidents, but contained details remarkably similar to my own experiences. I also discovered that my grandfather's stories about strange occurrences during his trucking days weren't unique. Other retired drivers had similar accounts: fog that appeared from nowhere, destinations that took longer to reach than they should have, and occasional encounters with people who didn't seem quite right. The pattern that emerged suggested that certain geographic areas, under specific atmospheric conditions, became susceptible to what could only be described as tears in normal space-time. These anomalies seem to occur most frequently during autumn months, particularly October and November, when fog conditions were common in the Central Valley. But understanding the phenomenon didn't help me escape it. I continued to cycle through the same experiences: the October 14th transport, the November 29th traffic stop, and increasingly other incidents that seemed to branch off from these main events. 6 months after my initial experience, I made the difficult decision to resign from the California Highway Patrol. In my resignation letter to Captain Davis, I cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue other career opportunities. I didn't mention the temporal loops, the impossible passengers, or the growing certainty that I was trapped in some kind of recurring anomaly. Dr. Mitchell had cleared me for full duty, but she recommended that I consider transferring to a different region, somewhere away from the Central Valley highways where the phenomena seemed most active. I thanked her for the suggestion, but realized that the problem wasn't geographic. Wherever I went, the loops seemed to follow me. I now work as a private investigator in Sacramento, specializing in missing persons cases and unusual incidents that other investigators won't touch. It's quieter work, but it allows me to research the phenomena I've experienced and to help others who have had similar encounters. My family has been understanding, though I haven't told them the complete truth about why I left CHP. Jennifer knows that something happened during my last months on the force, but she's accepted my explanation that I experienced some kind of stress-related incident that made continuing impossible. The children have adapted well to my career change. In some ways, I'm more available to them now than I was during my years working night shifts. I coach Jake's baseball team, help Emma with her science projects, and try to be the present, attentive father I always wanted to be. But the loops continue. They don't follow a predictable schedule. Sometimes weeks pass without incident. Sometimes I experience multiple cycles in a single day. The triggers seem to be related to specific weather conditions, particular times of day, and my emotional state when driving through certain areas. I've learned to recognize the early signs, subtle changes in the quality of light, slight distortions in familiar landmarks, and a particular feeling of disorientation that precedes the onset of temporal displacement. When I sense a loop beginning, I try to document everything. I carry a small digital recorder and a camera, and I've learned to take notes during the experience, though these records rarely survive the transition back to normal time. Occasionally, I receive phone calls from other law enforcement officers who have experienced similar phenomena. Word spreads quietly through certain circles, officers who have encountered things they can't explain, who need someone to listen without judgment. I listen to their stories, and I share what I've learned about accepting the experience rather than fighting it. I tell them about the importance of documentation, about the patterns I've identified, and most importantly about the fact that they're not alone, and they're not losing their minds. Most officers eventually return to normal service and never experience another incident. A few, like me, seem to be permanently affected, cycling through anomalous experiences for reasons we don't understand. There's a small, informal network of us now. Current and former law enforcement officers who have encountered temporal anomalies, spatial distortions, and impossible situations during routine duties. We stay in touch, share information, and support each other through the ongoing strangeness of our experiences. What we've learned is that these phenomena are more common than official records suggest. Most departments have protocols for handling officers who report unusual incidents, and these protocols typically involve psychological evaluation, administrative leave, and eventually transfer or retirement. The official position is usually that such reports represent stress-related hallucinations, equipment malfunctions, or misinterpretation of normal events under difficult conditions. And for most officers, this explanation is probably sufficient and healthy. But for those of us who continue to experience these anomalies, the official explanations fall short. We know what we've seen, what we've experienced, and what continues to happen to us. The fog still appears on certain nights along Highway 99. Other officers still pick up passengers who shouldn't exist, drive routes that lead nowhere, and experience time differently than their equipment records suggest. And somewhere in those cycles, Martinez and Kim continue their eternal journey, helping confused officers understand that reality is more complex and stranger than anyone wants to admit. Sometimes, on clear nights when I'm driving through the Central Valley on Interstate 5, I can see lights in my rearview mirror. Patrol cars that appear and disappear, following routes that don't exist on any map, carrying passengers who exist in the spaces between moments. The fog makes everything possible. And some journeys, I've learned, never really end. They just cycle through different versions of the same impossible truth, waiting for travelers who are ready to accept that the universe is far stranger than we ever imagined. Officer Daniel Stevens here, badge 34, 21, 17-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol. I've patrolled every mile of Highway 1 between San Francisco and Los Angeles, more times than I can count. But what happened during my shift on March 23, 2023, changed everything I thought I knew about that beautiful, treacherous stretch of coastline. Let me be straight with you from the start. I'm not a guy who believes in ghost stories or supernatural nonsense. I'm a practical man who grew up in Half Moon Bay, spent 4 years in the Marine Corps before joining CHP, and I've always been the type to look for logical explanations when things get strange. My dad was a commercial fisherman for 30 years. My mom worked at the Pillar Point Harbor managing boat registrations, and I learned early that the ocean is dangerous enough without adding imagination to the mix. My childhood was spent around boats, fishermen, and people who made their living from the sea. You hear stories in that environment. Tales of vessels that disappeared in calm weather, fishing boats found drifting empty with no sign of their crews, and experienced captains who swore they saw lights following them on foggy nights. But my family always treated these as just stories, the kind of tales that grow with each telling around the harbor after a few beers. When I joined CHP in 2006, I specifically requested assignment to Highway 1 Coastal Patrol. I knew the road intimately from growing up here, understood the unique challenges of policing a highway that hugs the Pacific coastline for hundreds of miles, and I felt like I could make a real difference keeping people safe on one of California's most scenic and dangerous routes. My decision to join law enforcement came after my military service. I'd served 2 tours in Iraq as a military police officer, and when I returned home, I wanted to continue serving in a way that would help protect people. The Marines had taught me discipline, attention to detail, and how to stay calm under pressure. All skills that would prove essential for Highway 1 patrol. Highway 1 presents challenges you don't find on inland routes. The road is narrow, winding, and carved into cliffsides that drop hundreds of feet to rocky beaches below. Weather conditions change rapidly along the coast. You can start your shift in bright sunshine and end it in thick coastal fog that reduces visibility to 20 feet. During winter storms, the ocean spray can reach the roadway, making driving conditions extremely hazardous. The highway itself is a marvel of engineering, but also a testament to human stubbornness. Engineers in the 1930s literally blasted this road through solid rock, creating a ribbon of asphalt that clings to cliffsides and spans deep canyons. Every mile represents years of dangerous construction work, and several workers died building the road. You can still see the blast marks in some of the rock faces, and there are sections where the road was built on fills that extend out over the ocean. The tourists don't help matters. Highway 1 attracts visitors from around the world who want to experience California's legendary coastal scenery, but many of them have no idea how dangerous the road can be. They drive rental cars too fast around blind curves, stop in dangerous locations to take selfies with the ocean backdrop, and frequently underestimate how quickly weather conditions can deteriorate along the coast. I've seen families from the Midwest try to navigate Highway 1 in heavy fog with absolutely no understanding of coastal driving conditions. I've responded to accidents where tourists have driven straight off cliffs because they were looking at their phones instead of the road. The combination of spectacular scenery and treacherous driving conditions creates a perfect storm for tragedy. During my 17 years on coastal patrol, I've responded to hundreds of accidents, vehicle breakdowns, and emergency medical calls. I've pulled bodies from cars that went over the cliff, directed traffic around rock slides that could take days to clear, and helped stranded motorists during winter storms that made the highway impassable for hours. I've seen the ocean claim vehicles during high tides, watched landslides swallow entire sections of roadway, and dealt with accidents that seemed to defy explanation. I've also seen the highway's strange moods. There are stretches where accidents happen repeatedly, almost as if the road itself is cursed. Devil's Slide, north of Half Moon Bay, is notorious for claiming vehicles during storms. The stretch near Big Sur has swallowed cars during landslides, and some of those vehicles are never recovered. The curve near Pescadero Creek has seen more single-car accidents than any other location on my patrol route. But it's not just the obvious dangers that make Highway 1 unique. There's something about the isolation, the constant sound of crashing waves, and the way fog can roll in and cut you off from the rest of the world that affects people psychologically. I've responded to calls where motorists have had complete mental breakdowns, unable to cope with the claustrophobic feeling of being trapped between the ocean and towering cliffs. There are also the unexplained incidents. Cars found abandoned with no sign of their occupants, vehicles discovered in impossible locations, and reports from motorists who swear they've seen other cars that simply vanish when approached. Most officers dismiss these as stress-related hallucinations or misidentification of shadows and fog, but after 17 years on this road, I've learned that Highway 1 doesn't follow normal rules. The road has a memory, if that makes sense. Certain locations seem to attract accidents year after year. The same curves, the same weather conditions, sometimes even similar vehicle types. I've responded to accidents at locations where I knew immediately what I would find because I'd been there before under nearly identical circumstances. My shift on March 23, 2023, started like any other Thursday evening. I reported for duty at 4 p.m. at the CHP office in Half Moon Bay, which serves as headquarters for coastal patrol operations between San Francisco and Santa Cruz. The office is located in a converted 1960s building that always smells faintly of salt air and coffee, with walls covered in maps showing accident patterns and hazard locations along the coast. The building itself has character. It was originally constructed as a Coast Guard station before being converted for CHP use in the 1980s. The floors creak when you walk across them. The windows are constantly fogged with salt spray, and the radio equipment has to be replaced more frequently than inland stations due to corrosion from the marine environment. The weather forecast that day called for clear skies, transitioning to patchy fog after sunset, which was typical for March along the coast. Spring weather in the coastal mountains can be unpredictable. Clear and warm one moment, then shrouded in fog that rolls in from the ocean with startling speed. The marine layer can form rapidly when warm inland air meets the cold Pacific, creating fog banks that can stretch for miles and persist for hours. During the shift briefing, Sergeant Lisa Martinez went over the usual concerns for coastal patrol. Sergeant Martinez had been working Highway 1 for 12 years and knew every dangerous curve and accident-prone location along our stretch of coastline. She was a no-nonsense supervisor who expected thorough reports and professional conduct, but she also understood the unique stresses of coastal patrol work. The briefing covered increased tourist traffic due to spring break, ongoing construction delays near Pacifica that were backing up traffic during commute hours, and reports of aggressive sea lions on the beaches near Año Nuevo State Park that were drawing curious visitors who were parking illegally along the highway. The construction project near Pacifica had been ongoing for 8 months, requiring single-lane closures during peak traffic hours that created dangerous backup conditions. There had also been reports of unusual wildlife behavior. Marine biologists from UC Santa Cruz had observed that whales and dolphins were staying unusually close to shore, and several dead seabirds had been found along beaches with no obvious cause of death. Sergeant Martinez warned us to be alert for any unusual animal behavior that might indicate environmental hazards or changes in ocean conditions. Additionally, there had been increased reports of reckless driving and illegal camping along remote sections of Highway 1. Spring break was bringing more visitors than usual, and many were unfamiliar with coastal driving conditions and local regulations. We were instructed to maintain high visibility patrols and to be particularly vigilant about speeding in construction zones. My assigned patrol sector that night was Highway 1 between Half Moon Bay and Santa Cruz, approximately 60 miles of coastline that includes some of the most remote and beautiful stretches of the route. This sector encompasses the small coastal towns of Pescadero, San Gregorio, and Davenport, along with dozens of state beaches, redwood groves, and agricultural areas. The sector also includes some of the most accident-prone stretches of Highway 1. The curves around Pescadero Creek, the steep grades near Waddle Creek, and the notorious fog zone around Pigeon Point Lighthouse have claimed numerous vehicles over the years. Part of my job was to maintain high visibility in these areas to discourage dangerous driving and to be positioned for rapid response when accidents occurred. I began my patrol around 4:30 p.m., driving south from Half Moon Bay toward Pescadero. Traffic was moderate for a Thursday afternoon, a mix of local commuters heading home to coastal communities and early tourists starting their weekend trips. The late afternoon light was spectacular, turning the ocean into a sheet of gold and highlighting the green hills that roll down to the coastline like giant waves frozen in time. Everything seemed normal during the first hour of my patrol. I conducted routine speed enforcement near the Pescadero Creek Bridge, where the speed limit drops from 55 to 35 due to the sharp curves and narrow bridge. I assisted a motorist with a flat tire near San Gregorio State Beach, helping them change their tire in a safe location away from traffic. I also responded to a minor fender bender at a scenic overlook where two tourists had been so distracted by the view that they backed into each other while trying to leave the parking area. These were typical incidents for coastal patrol. The combination of spectacular scenery and unfamiliar driving conditions leads to a steady stream of minor accidents and traffic violations. Most tourists drive more slowly than the posted speed limits, but they also tend to make sudden stops and unpredictable lane changes when they spot something they want to photograph. The first unusual incident occurred around 6:15 p.m., just as the sun was beginning to set. I was parked at a scenic overlook about 3 miles north of Pescadero, conducting routine speed enforcement and enjoying one of the genuine benefits of coastal patrol: watching the Pacific Ocean change colors as the day ended. The overlook is one of my favorite spots on Highway 1. It provides an unobstructed view of the coastline stretching north toward Half Moon Bay and south toward Santa Cruz. On clear days, you can see the Farallon Islands on the horizon and watch fishing boats heading out for night fishing. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below is constant and soothing, and the salt air has a clean, fresh quality that you don't find inland. A silver Toyota Camry approached from the north, traveling at what appeared to be a reasonable speed. I wasn't running radar at that moment, so I didn't get an exact reading, but the vehicle seemed to be maintaining the posted 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. The car looked relatively new, maybe 3 or 4 years old, with no obvious damage or equipment violations. But as the Camry passed my location, I noticed something that struck me as odd. The driver appeared to be a woman in her 30s with long brown hair, and she was looking directly at me with an expression of what seemed like recognition or familiarity. This wasn't the usual quick glance that most drivers give when they see a patrol car. She was staring at me as if she knew me personally. What struck me as strange was that she slowed down significantly as she passed, almost as if she was expecting me to pull her over. When I didn't activate my lights, she continued south, but I could see her watching me in her rearview mirror until she disappeared around a curve near the Pescadero Creek Bridge. This behavior wasn't necessarily alarming. Some drivers become nervous around police vehicles even when they're not doing anything wrong, but there was something about her expression, the way she had looked at me with what seemed like sadness or desperation, that stuck with me. It was as if she was trying to communicate something without words. 5 minutes later, the same silver Camry approached from the north again. Same woman, same long brown hair, same expression of recognition. This time, I paid closer attention to the license plate. 7XYZ419. She slowed down again as she passed, looking directly at me with that same unsettling expression, then continued south toward Pescadero. I found this peculiar, but not necessarily alarming. Sometimes people make U-turns at scenic overlooks and drive the same stretch of road multiple times to enjoy the scenery. It's not uncommon, especially during sunset when the light is particularly beautiful. Tourists often drive back and forth along particularly scenic stretches, taking photos and trying to capture the perfect view for their social media accounts. But when the same car passed for a third time, 10 minutes later, I decided to investigate. The repetitive behavior could indicate a number of problems: a lost driver who was confused about directions, someone experiencing a medical emergency, or potentially someone conducting surveillance on my position for criminal purposes. I pulled out behind the Camry and activated my emergency lights to initiate a traffic stop. The driver immediately responded by pulling over in a safe location at a wide spot in the road where there was adequate shoulder space and good visibility in both directions. I approached the vehicle following standard CHP procedures, positioning myself slightly behind the driver's window to maintain a tactical advantage while remaining visible in her mirrors. But as I got closer to the driver's side window, I noticed something that made me pause and reassess the situation. The woman looked exactly as I had observed during her previous passes. Mid-30s, long brown hair, wearing a light blue sweater. But there was something deeply unsettling about her expression. She wasn't looking at me with the normal mixture of concern and curiosity that most people show during traffic stops. Instead, she was watching me with what I can only describe as profound sadness, as if she was grieving for something. "Good evening, ma'am," I said as she rolled down her window. "The reason I stopped you is that I've observed your vehicle passing this same location multiple times in the past 20 minutes. Is everything all right?" She smiled, but it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. The kind of smile someone gives when they're trying to be brave about terrible news. "Officer Stevens," she said, "I've been waiting for you to stop me." The fact that she knew my name immediately raised red flags. I wasn't wearing a visible name tag, and I hadn't introduced myself. My nameplate was attached to my uniform shirt, but it would have been difficult for her to read from her position in the driver's seat, especially in the fading daylight. "How do you know my name?" "We've met before," she said. "Several times, actually. You just don't remember yet." I kept my hand near my service weapon but tried to maintain a professional demeanor. There was nothing overtly threatening about her behavior, but the situation was clearly abnormal. The fact that she knew my name suggested either prior contact or some form of surveillance. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your driver's license and vehicle registration." She reached into her purse without any hesitation and handed me her documents. The driver's license identified her as Carol Williams, age 34, with an address in Daly City. The photo matched her appearance perfectly, and the license appeared to be legitimate with proper security features and no obvious signs of forgery. The vehicle registration showed the car was registered to Carol Williams at the same Daly City address, with current registration and insurance information. Everything appeared to be in order from a documentation standpoint, but the situation still felt wrong. "Miss Williams, what do you mean we've met before?" "Officer Stevens, what time does your shift end tonight?" I found this question odd and potentially concerning. Citizens asking about officer schedules could indicate surveillance for criminal purposes, or it might suggest someone planning to file a complaint and wanting to know when I would be available. "Ma'am, that's not relevant to this stop. Can you explain why you've been driving past the same location repeatedly?" "Because I've been looking for you," she said. "I need to warn you about what's going to happen tonight." "Warn me about what?" Carol Williams looked out at the ocean, which was now reflecting the orange and pink colors of the sunset, in a display that would have been breathtaking under normal circumstances. When she looked back at me, her expression was even sadder than before. "Officer Stevens, you're going to respond to an accident tonight around 11:30 p.m. A single vehicle rollover about 15 miles south of here, near Watto Creek. You're going to find a silver Toyota Camry that went off the road." I felt a chill run down my spine. The specificity of her prediction was alarming, and the detail about the vehicle type matching her own car was particularly troubling. This could indicate someone planning to cause an accident, either involving themselves or others. "Miss Williams, are you planning to cause an accident?" "No," she said quietly. "I'm going to be the accident." Before I could respond, she handed me a folded piece of paper. "Officer Stevens, I need you to keep this. After you find my car tonight, read what I've written. It will help you understand what's happening here. Ma'am, I think you need medical attention. I'm going to call for an ambulance." "That won't help," she said. "Officer Stevens, I died in that accident 3 years ago, on March 23rd, 2020. But somehow I keep reliving this day and you keep finding me." I stared at her. trying to process what she had just told me. She looked completely normal, not like someone experiencing a psychotic break or under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Her speech was clear and coherent. Her movements were coordinated, and she showed no obvious signs of mental illness or substance abuse. "Miss Williams, I think there's been some confusion. Today is March 23rd, 2023. I know what day it is," she said, "and I know this is the 47th time we've had this conversation." I was about to respond when my radio crackled with an emergency call. "All units, we have a reported vehicle over the side on Highway 1, approximately mile marker 73, single vehicle accident, requesting immediate response and rescue units." Mile marker 73 was about 15 miles south of my current location, near Wattle Creek, exactly where Carol Williams had said I would find her accident. I looked back at the driver's seat of the Camry, but it was empty. Carol Williams had vanished. The driver's license and registration I had been holding were gone. The folded piece of paper she had given me was the only evidence that our conversation had taken place. I ran back to my patrol car and attempted to radio dispatch for verification of the call and additional information about the accident. 7. Adam 32 to dispatch. I need verification on that accident location. What type of vehicle was reported? 7 Adam 32. Reporting party described a silver Toyota. Camry, single occupant, appears to have left the roadway and rolled down the embankment. Fire and rescue units are en route. My hands were shaking as I started my patrol car and began driving south toward the accident scene. I kept looking in my rearview mirror, expecting to see the silver Camry following me, but the road behind me was empty. During the 15-minute drive to the accident location, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The most logical explanation was that Carol Williams was experiencing some kind of psychological episode and had somehow managed to slip away while I was distracted by the radio call. But that didn't explain how she had known about the accident before it was reported, or how she had known my name. I arrived at mile marker 73 at 6:47 p.m. The accident scene was exactly as described. Fresh tire marks indicated that a vehicle had left the roadway at high speed and rolled down a steep embankment toward the ocean. I could see a silver Toyota Camry about 200 feet down the slope, resting on its roof against a large boulder. Fire and rescue units were already on scene, working to establish safe access to the vehicle. The embankment was steep and unstable, with loose rocks and sandy soil that made the rescue operation extremely dangerous. The vehicle was positioned precariously, and any attempt to reach it would require specialized equipment and careful planning. I began directing traffic around the emergency vehicles and establishing a safety perimeter for the rescue operation. This involved setting up flares and traffic cones to warn approaching motorists and coordinating with other responding units to ensure proper scene management. Captain Robert Hayes from CAL FIRE approached me as I was setting up the traffic control pattern. Captain Hayes was a 20-year veteran of coastal rescue operations who had seen every type of accident imaginable along Highway 1. "Officer Stevens, we've got a problem with this accident." "What kind of problem?" "The vehicle's been here for a while. The paint damage and rust patterns suggest it's been exposed to salt air for months, maybe years. But the accident was just reported 20 minutes ago by a passing motorist." I looked down at the overturned Camry. From this distance, I could see that Captain Hayes was right. The vehicle showed extensive signs of long-term exposure to coastal weather. The silver paint was faded and pitted with salt corrosion. There were rust stains around the wheel wells and door frames, and marine growth was visible on the undercarriage. "Any sign of the driver?" "That's the other strange thing," Captain Hayes said. "We found a body in the driver's seat, but the coroner thinks she's been dead for quite some time. Decomposition is consistent with several years of exposure to the elements. I felt my stomach drop. Several years? The weird part is, we got calls from 3 different witnesses who saw this accident happen tonight. All of them described seeing a silver Camry go off the road around 6:30 p.m., but the physical evidence suggests this crash happened years ago. I pulled out the folded piece of paper Carol Williams had given me. With trembling hands, I unfolded it and read what she had written. Officer Stevens, by the time you read this, you will have found my car and my body. I died on March the 23rd, 2020, but something keeps pulling me back to this day, this road, this moment. I've tried to warn you 46 times before, but you never remember our previous conversations. Something is wrong with this stretch of Highway 1. Time doesn't work the way it should. The road remembers every death, every accident, every moment of tragedy, and it replays them over and over. Please be careful tonight. The road wants to keep you too. Don't let it take you like it took me. Carol Williams. Below her message, she had written what appeared to be a list of dates. March the 23rd, 2020, original accident. March the 23rd, 2021, first repeat with 12 conversations. March the 23rd, 2022, second year of repeats with 17 more conversations. March the 23rd, 2023, third year of repeats, conversations 30 through 47. At the bottom, she had added a note. Officer Stevens, each year more people join the loop. Be careful who you try to help tonight. Captain Hayes noticed me reading the paper. Officer Stevens, where did you get that? I started to explain about my encounter with Carol Williams, but as I spoke, I realized how impossible it sounded. According to the rescue team, the driver of the Camry had been dead for years, but I had just spoken with her 20 minutes earlier. Captain, I need to ask you something. Have you worked this exact same accident before? Captain Hayes paused, then looked down at the overturned vehicle with a puzzled expression. You know what's strange? This scene feels familiar, like I've been here before. The position of the vehicle, the damage pattern, even the way the light is hitting the wreckage. But according to our records, this is the first time we've responded to an accident at this location. The rescue operation continued for another 2 hours. The body recovered from the vehicle was indeed Carol Williams, and the coroner's preliminary assessment confirmed that she had been deceased for approximately 3 years. The vehicle registration matched the information I had been given during the traffic stop, but according to DMV records, Carol Williams had been reported deceased in March 2020. The official conclusion was that the original accident had somehow been missed for 3 years, and recent winter storms had made the wreckage visible from the roadway for the first time. The witnesses who reported seeing the accident tonight were assumed to have been mistaken about the timing, possibly confusing old memories with current observations. But I knew what I had experienced. I had spoken with Carol Williams. She had known my name, predicted the location of her own accident, and given me information about previous encounters that I couldn't remember. After the accident scene was cleared and the vehicle was towed away, I continued my patrol south toward Santa Cruz. The night was clear and traffic was light. I tried to put the incident out of my mind and focus on routine patrol duties, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. Around 9:30 p.m., I was parked at another scenic overlook near Bonnie Doon, a small community nestled in the redwood-covered hills above the coast. This location provided an excellent view of Highway 1 as it wound along the coastline, and it was a good position for monitoring traffic and conducting speed enforcement. I noticed headlights approaching from the north. As the vehicle got closer, I could see it was a red Ford Mustang, driving at what appeared to be a reasonable speed and showing no obvious violations. But as the Mustang passed my location, the driver looked directly at me with the same expression of recognition I had seen on Carol Williams' face. The driver appeared to be a man in his 40s with short gray hair, and he slowed down significantly as he passed, just as Carol had done. 5 minutes later, the same red Mustang approached from the north again. Same driver, same expression of recognition, same deceleration as he passed my position. When the Mustang passed for a third time, I activated my emergency lights and initiated a traffic stop. The driver pulled over immediately and was waiting with his hands visible on the steering wheel when I approached his vehicle. He was a man in his mid-40s with short gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a dark jacket. "Good evening, sir," I said. "The reason I stopped you is that I've observed your vehicle passing this location multiple times. Is everything all right?" He smiled sadly. "Officer Stevens, I've been looking for you." Again, he knew my name without introduction. "How do you know who I am?" "We've met before," he said. "My name is Tom Rodriguez. I died on this highway on March 23, 2019. I felt the same chill I had experienced during my encounter with Carol Williams. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your license and registration." He handed me his documents without hesitation. The license identified him as Thomas Rodriguez, age 43, with an address in Watsonville. Like Carol Williams' license, it appeared to be legitimate. "Mr. Rodriguez, what do you mean you died on this highway?" "Single car accident around midnight, about 8 miles south of here. I was driving home from work when something caused me to lose control. The car went off a cliff and into the ocean. They never recovered my body." "Sir, you're sitting right here talking to me. You're obviously not dead." Tom Rodriguez looked out at the dark ocean, then back at me. "Officer Stevens, you're going to find my car tonight. It's going to wash up on the beach near Davenport, just like it does every year on March 23rd. Red Mustang, license plate 4ABC789. I looked at the license plate on his vehicle. 4ABC789. "This is your car, Mr. Rodriguez. You're driving it right now." "Look at your watch, Officer Stevens." "What time is it?" I checked my watch, 9:45 p.m. "Now look at your patrol car's dashboard clock." I turned to look at my patrol car. The dashboard clock showed 11:58 p.m. "That's impossible," I said. "I just checked my watch." "Time doesn't work correctly on this stretch of highway," Tom Rodriguez said. "Especially on March 23rd, that's when it happened. When whatever changed this place started affecting people who died here." Before I could ask what he meant, my radio crackled with another emergency call. "All units, we have a report of a vehicle in the water near Davenport Beach. Appears to be a red passenger car requesting immediate response and marine rescue." I looked back at Tom Rodriguez, but like Carol Williams before him, he had vanished. His car was gone, and I was standing alone on the roadway, holding a driver's license that was becoming transparent in my hands. I drove south to Davenport Beach as quickly as safely possible. When I arrived, I found Coast Guard and Marine rescue units already on scene, working to recover a red Ford Mustang from the surf. The vehicle had apparently washed up on the beach during high tide. Coast Guard Petty Officer Jennifer Walsh briefed me on the situation. "Officer Stevens, this is a strange one. The vehicle appears to have been in the water for years. Extensive saltwater corrosion, marine growth on the undercarriage, the works. But multiple witnesses called in tonight reporting seeing a car go off the cliff." "Any sign of the driver?" "That's what's really weird. We found remains in the driver's seat, but they're old. The coroner estimates several years old. The license plate matches a missing person case from 2019. Thomas Rodriguez, reported missing after failing to return home from work on March 23, 2019. I stood on the beach, watching the waves wash around the partially submerged Mustang, and tried to process what was happening. Two separate incidents involving people who had died years ago on March the 23rd, both of whom had spoken to me as if they were alive, both of whom had known details about accidents that were about to be discovered. The official explanation for both incidents was the same. Winter storms had uncovered old accident sites that had somehow been missed for years. The witnesses were assumed to be mistaken about timing or experiencing some kind of mass hallucination. But I knew what I had experienced. I had spoken with both Carol Williams and Tom Rodriguez. They had been as real as any living person I had ever encountered. After the scene at Davenport Beach was cleared, I continued my patrol south. I was now seriously questioning my own sanity, but I still had several hours left on my shift and a responsibility to maintain public safety on Highway 1. Around 1:30 a.m., I received a call about a possible stranded motorist near the Pigeon Point Lighthouse. A passing driver had reported seeing someone walking along the roadway and waving for help. I arrived at the location and immediately spotted a figure walking along the shoulder of the highway. As I got closer, I could see it was a young woman, probably in her 20s, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. She appeared to be uninjured but distressed. I activated my emergency lights and pulled over to assist her. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need help?" She approached my patrol car with obvious relief. "Officer Stevens, thank God you're here. I've been walking for hours." Once again, she knew my name. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Amy Chen. My car broke down around 2 a.m. and I've been trying to find help." I looked at my watch. 1:45 a.m. "Ma'am, it's only 1:45. Your car couldn't have broken down at 2. Amy Chen looked confused. "Officer Stevens, it's almost 4 a.m. I've been walking for nearly 2 hours. I checked my patrol car's dashboard clock. 3:52 a.m. The time discrepancy was happening again. "Miss Chen, where is your vehicle?" "About a mile north of here. It just stopped running. I was driving home to San Francisco from a friend's wedding in Monterey." "When did this happen?" "March 23, 2018, she said without hesitation. I felt my blood run cold. "Ma'am, today is March 23, 2023. Amy Chen stared at me with growing confusion. "That's impossible. I was just at Sarah's wedding tonight. It's 2018. I radioed dispatch to request a tow truck and backup, but received only static in response. I tried my cell phone, but there was no signal. "Miss Chen, I'm going to give you a ride to your vehicle." As we drove north, Amy Chen talked about the wedding she had attended, describing events and people with vivid detail. She seemed completely convinced that it was 2018 and that only a few hours had passed since her car broke down. We found her vehicle about a mile north of where I had picked her up. A blue Honda Civic parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. But, like the previous vehicles I had encountered, this car showed signs of long-term abandonment. The paint was faded, the tires were flat, and there was rust around the wheel wells. "That's not my car," Amy said as we approached. "My car is brand new. I just bought it last month." But the license plate matched the registration she showed me, and when she tried her key, it opened the door. Inside the vehicle, I found something that made my hands shake. A newspaper on the passenger seat dated March 24, 2018, with a headline about a missing person. "San Francisco woman disappears during drive home from Monterey." The article included a photo of Amy Chen and described how she had left a wedding in Monterey on the evening of March the 23rd, 2018, and never arrived home. Her abandoned vehicle had been found on Highway 1 near Pigeon Point, but there was no sign of what had happened to her. I looked back at Amy, who was staring at her car with growing horror. Officer Stevens. I remember now. I remember walking along this road, but it wasn't for 2 hours, it was for years. Walking the same stretch over and over, looking for help that never came. Amy, what happened to you? I don't know. I remember my car breaking down, and I remember starting to walk. Then, everything gets confused. Sometimes it's day, sometimes it's night. Sometimes there are other people walking with me, other people who say they're lost on Highway 1. Before I could ask more questions, I heard the sound of approaching vehicles. Multiple sets of headlights were coming from both directions. CHP patrol cars, fire trucks, and what appeared to be Coast Guard vehicles. As the vehicles got closer, I could see that they were all older models. Patrol cars from different eras, fire trucks with outdated equipment, and Coast Guard vehicles that looked like they hadn't been used in years. The vehicles stopped in a circle around us, and officers began getting out. But these weren't contemporary CHP officers. Their uniforms were from different time periods. Some from the 1990s, some from the 2000s, some from even earlier eras. A sergeant with an old-style CHP uniform approached me. His name tag read Williams. Officer Stevens, I'm Sergeant Robert Williams. I died on this highway in 1987. Sergeant, what's happening here? You're experiencing what happens to law enforcement officers who patrol this section of Highway 1 on March 23rd. The road collects us, especially those of us who try to help the people who are trapped here. I looked around at the other officers. There were at least a dozen of them, representing decades of CHP service. How long have you been here? Time doesn't work the same way it does in the normal world, Sergeant Williams said. Some of us have been here for decades, others just arrived. But we all ended up here the same way, by trying to help people on March 23rd. Another officer approached. A woman in a 1990s era uniform. Her name tag read Martinez. Officer Stevens, I'm Officer Linda Martinez. I've been trying to solve this for 15 years. Near as I can figure, something happened on this stretch of highway that created some kind of anomaly. People who die here on March 20th, 3rd, get trapped in a loop, reliving their last day over and over. But why March 23rd specifically? We think it started in 1963, Officer Martinez said. There was a massive accident that night. A tour bus went off the cliff near Devil's Slide, killing 23 people. Ever since then, March 23rd has been different on this highway. Amy Chen was listening to this conversation with growing agitation. Officer Stevens, I want to go home. I want to call my family. Amy, I said gently, according to that newspaper, you've been missing for 5 years. Your family thinks you're dead. She started crying. But I'm not dead, I'm right here. Sergeant Williams put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Amy, you're not dead, but you're not exactly alive either. None of us are. We exist in a state between life and death, trapped on this highway. Is there a way out? The officers looked at each other with expressions of uncertainty. We don't know, Officer Martinez said. Some people seem to fade away after a while, like they finally accept what happened and move on. Others stay trapped indefinitely. What about people who aren't supposed to be here? I asked. I'm not dead. I'm on active duty. That's what makes your situation dangerous, Sergeant Williams said. You're alive, but the highway is trying to trap you anyway. If you stay here much longer, you might not be able to leave. I looked at my watch, 2:15 a.m. Then I checked my patrol car's dashboard, 5:43 a.m. How do I get out? "We think you have to get off Highway 1 before sunrise," Officer Martinez said. "But not by driving north or south. The highway won't let you leave that way. You have to go inland, away from the coast." "What about everyone else? What about Amy and the others who are trapped?" "We don't know how to help them," Sergeant Williams said sadly. "We've been trying for decades, but the highway won't let them go." As he spoke, I noticed that the other officers were becoming less distinct, like images fading from an old photograph. Amy Chen was also becoming translucent. "Officer Stevens," Amy said, her voice becoming fainter. "Please don't forget about us. Please tell someone what happened here." One by one, the other officers and Amy began to disappear. Soon, I was standing alone on Highway 1 with only my patrol car and the abandoned Honda Civic. I immediately started driving inland, away from the coast. I took the first exit I could find that led away from Highway 1, driving east through winding back roads until I reached Highway 101. Only when I was on Highway 101 did I feel like I could breathe normally again. I checked my watch and my dashboard clock. They finally showed the same time, 3:22 a.m. I completed my shift on Highway 101, then drove directly to CHP headquarters in Half Moon Bay to file my report. But when I tried to document what had happened, I faced the same problem that officers in similar situations always face. How do you explain the impossible? I filed a routine patrol report mentioning the recovery of 2 abandoned vehicles and 1 missing person case, but I didn't include the details about my conversations with the dead or the time distortions. I knew that kind of information would result in a psychological evaluation and possible suspension. Over the following days, I researched the history of Highway 1 accidents on March 23rd. What I found was disturbing. There was indeed a pattern of unexplained disappearances, single car accidents, and abandoned vehicles on that date stretching back decades. The 1963 bus accident that Officer Martinez had mentioned was real. 23 people had died when a Greyhound bus went off the cliff near Devil's Slide during a spring storm. But there were other incidents too. Almost every year since 1963, there had been at least one unexplained disappearance or accident on Highway 1 on March 23rd. Most of these cases remained unsolved. Vehicles would be found abandoned, sometimes with evidence that the driver had simply vanished mid-journey. Bodies were rarely recovered, and when they were, they often showed signs of having been exposed to the elements for much longer than the timeline of their disappearance would suggest. I also found records of CHP officers who had experienced unusual incidents while patrolling Highway 1 on March 23rd. Most of these reports were buried in old files or classified as stress-related incidents, but the pattern was unmistakable. 3 months after my experience, I requested a transfer to inland patrol routes. I told my supervisors that I wanted to gain experience on different types of highways, which was accepted without question. But every year on March 23rd, I make a point of monitoring CHP radio traffic for Highway 1. And every year, there are reports of abandoned vehicles, missing persons, and officers experiencing equipment malfunctions along that stretch of a coastline. Last year, on March 23rd, 2024, I received a phone call at home from a young CHP officer named Kevin Walsh. He had gotten my number from another officer and said he needed to talk to someone about an experience he'd had on Highway 1. Officer Walsh described encountering multiple stranded motorists who claimed to have been trapped on the highway for years. He told me about time distortions, conversations with people who shouldn't exist, and vehicles that showed signs of long-term abandonment despite being involved in accidents that had just occurred. I listened to his story and told him what I had learned about Highway 1 on March 23rd. I advised him to request a transfer away from Coastal Patrol and to document everything he could remember about his experience. Since then, I've been contacted by 3 other officers who have had similar encounters. We stay in touch and share information about what we've learned. None of us has found a way to help the people who are trapped on Highway 1, but we've all agreed to keep trying to understand the phenomenon. What I know for certain is that Highway 1 between Half Moon Bay and Santa Cruz is not a normal road. Something happened there in 1963 that changed the fundamental nature of that stretch of coastline. On March the 23rd of each year, the boundary between life and death becomes permeable, and people get caught in temporal loops that can last for decades. The official position of CHP is that these reports represent stress-related hallucinations, equipment malfunctions, or misinterpretation of normal events under difficult conditions. Officers who report unusual experiences on Highway 1 are typically given psychological evaluations and transferred to different assignments. But those of us who have experienced these phenomena know better. We know that there are people trapped on that highway, reliving their final day over and over, waiting for someone to find a way to help them cross over to whatever comes next. Every March 23rd, I think about Amy Chen, Carol Williams, Tom Rodriguez, and all the others who are still walking along Highway 1, looking for help that never seems to come. I think about the CHP officers who are trapped there too, still trying to serve and protect even in death. I've tried to research the original bus accident from 1963, hoping to find some clue about what might have caused the anomaly. But most of the records from that time have been lost or destroyed. What I do know is that the accident happened during a severe spring storm, and that several of the victims were never found despite extensive search efforts. There are local legends about that stretch of Highway 1 that date back to before the road was built. Native American tribes in the area spoke of certain places along the coast where the spirits of the dead would become trapped, unable to move on to the next world. Spanish missionaries recorded similar stories from converts who warned them about camping in certain locations near the ocean. But whether these stories are connected to what's happening now, I don't know. What I do know is that every year, on March 23rd, something draws the dead back to Highway 1, and every year more people join them. I've considered going back on March the 23rd, armed with better knowledge of what to expect. Maybe I could help some of the trapped souls find their way to whatever comes next. But I'm also afraid that if I go back, I might not be able to leave again. The highway has a hunger, if that makes sense. It feeds on tragedy, on loss, on the final moments of people's lives. And once it has tasted death in a particular location, it keeps calling those souls back year after year. I still patrol Highway 101 and Interstate 280, and I love my job. But I'll never forget the night I learned that death isn't always the end, and that some highways collect souls the way tide pools collect seawater. The ocean is eternal, and apparently so are some of the people who died trying to drive along its edge. They're still out there, still waiting, still hoping that someday someone will find a way to guide them home. Just not on March 23rd. Never on March 23rd. If you're ever driving Highway 1 between Half Moon Bay and Santa Cruz on March 23rd, be careful. Don't stop to help stranded motorists unless you're certain they're really alive. Don't trust your watch or your dashboard clock. And if you start seeing the same vehicles pass by multiple times, get off the highway as quickly as possible and drive inland. The coast is beautiful, but some places are too dangerous for the living. And Highway 1 on March 23rd is definitely one of those places. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm working my regular patrol on Highway 101, I can see lights in the distance toward the coast. Headlights that appear and disappear, following routes that shouldn't exist. Emergency vehicles responding to accidents that happened decades ago. Officers still trying to help people who can never be saved. I know that somewhere out there, Carol Williams is still trying to warn someone about her accident. Tom Rodriguez is still driving his red Mustang, looking for a way home that he'll never find. Amy Chen is still walking along the shoulder, hoping someone will stop to help her. And every year, on March 23rd, new souls join them in their endless patrol of that haunted stretch of coastline. The highway remembers everything. Every death, every tragedy, every final moment of terror as someone realizes they're going over the cliff. And it replays these moments endlessly, trapping the souls of the dead in an eternal loop of their last day on Earth. That's the real horror of Highway 1. Not that people die there, because people die on every highway in California. The horror is that some of them never really leave. They become part of the road itself, doomed to repeat their final journey over and over, always hoping that this time will be different. This time, someone will save them. This time, they'll make it home. But they never do. The highway won't let them go. And now I carry that knowledge with me every day. The knowledge that there are places in this world where the normal rules don't apply, where death is not an ending but a beginning of something much worse. An endless repetition of tragedy that can trap souls for decades. I've thought about retiring early, leaving California entirely, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and Highway 1. But I know it wouldn't matter. Once you've seen what I've seen, once you've spoken with the dead, you carry that experience with you wherever you go. So I continue my work, patrolling the safer highways, helping living people with real problems that have real solutions. But every March 23rd, I monitor the radio traffic from Highway 1, listening for reports that I know will come. Abandoned vehicles, missing persons, officers experiencing equipment malfunctions. And I wonder how many other highways in California have similar secrets. How many other stretches of road where tragedy has torn holes in the fabric of reality, creating pockets where the dead refuse to stay dead. I hope I never find out. Once was enough. The coast will always be beautiful, and Highway 1 will always attract visitors who want to experience its spectacular scenery. Most of them will have wonderful trips, taking photos and making memories that will last a lifetime. But some of them won't make it home. And their cars will join the growing collection of vehicles that appear and disappear along that haunted stretch of coastline, driven by souls who are forever lost between the world of the living and whatever comes after. The highway remembers everything, and it never forgets. My name is Officer Sarah Mitchell, badge number 2947, and I've been patrolling California's desert highways for 12 years. What happened to me on Interstate 15 between Barstow and the Nevada border during a series of incidents in August 2023 is something I'm still trying to understand, even 6 months later. Before I tell you this story, you need to understand something about desert patrol. It's not like working the coastal routes or the Central Valley. Out here in the Mojave, you're dealing with extreme isolation, brutal heat, and vast distances between any kind of civilization. The nearest backup can be an hour away on a good day, and cell phone coverage is spotty at best in many areas. I grew up in Barstow, so I've been familiar with desert conditions my whole life. My father, Robert Mitchell, worked for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway for 32 years, maintaining the tracks that run parallel to Interstate 15 through the Mojave. He spent his career dealing with the challenges of keeping rail equipment functioning in extreme temperatures, and he taught me early that the desert doesn't forgive mistakes. My mother, Linda Mitchell, was a dispatcher for San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department for 28 years, coordinating emergency responses across thousands of square miles of desert terrain. She handled everything from search and rescue operations for lost hikers to coordinating multi-agency responses for major traffic accidents on remote highways. Growing up in a law enforcement family, I heard plenty of stories about the challenges of desert policing. Experienced deputies talking about cases that took days to resolve because of the distances involved, hikers found in impossible locations miles from any trail, and vehicles discovered abandoned in areas that should have been unreachable by conventional means. But my parents always emphasized the importance of sticking to facts and finding logical explanations for unusual events. The desert is strange enough without adding imagination to it, my father used to say. Heat, isolation, and dehydration can make people see and believe things that aren't there. After graduating from Cal State San Bernardino with a degree in criminal justice, I joined CHP in 2011, specifically to work desert patrol. I wanted to serve the communities scattered across the Mojave, help stranded motorists on some of California's most dangerous highways, and be part of the team that keeps traffic moving safely through one of the most challenging driving environments in the country. Desert patrol requires different skills than urban or suburban law enforcement. You need to understand how extreme temperatures affect both vehicles and human behavior. You need to be able to navigate vast areas with limited landmarks and unreliable GPS coverage. And you need to be prepared for emergencies that can become life-threatening very quickly due to the isolation and harsh conditions. Interstate 15 through the Mojave Desert is a critical transportation corridor connecting Southern California to Las Vegas and points east. It carries massive amounts of commercial truck traffic, weekend gamblers heading to Nevada casinos, tourists exploring Death Valley and other desert attractions, and military personnel traveling between bases throughout the Southwest. The highway crosses some of the most desolate terrain in North America, with stretches where there's nothing but sagebrush, sand, and rocky outcroppings for 50 miles in any direction. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees, and winter storms can bring snow and ice to elevations above 3,000 feet. The challenges of desert patrol are unique and sometimes deadly. Temperatures hot enough to kill an unprepared motorist within hours. Vehicle breakdowns that would be minor inconveniences in urban areas, but can become life-threatening emergencies in the desert, and vast distances that make routine calls into major operations requiring multiple agencies and hours of coordination. Water is scarce, shade is almost non-existent, and the nearest tow truck or repair service can be hundreds of miles away. During summer months, we carry extra water, emergency shelter, and cooling equipment in our patrol vehicles because a simple traffic stop can turn into a rescue operation if someone's vehicle breaks down. During my 12 years on desert patrol, I've responded to every type of emergency imaginable. Heat stroke victims found wandering deliriously along the highway, their vehicles abandoned miles behind them. Families stranded for days when their vehicle broke down in remote areas, surviving on fast food and warm soda until rescue arrived. Commercial truck drivers who pushed their rigs beyond safe limits and ended up jackknifed across multiple lanes of traffic. I've pulled bodies from vehicles that went off the road during sandstorms, coordinated search and rescue operations for hikers who got lost in Joshua Tree National Park, and worked accident scenes where extreme heat made it dangerous for first responders to work for more than 15 minutes at a time. I've also seen the desert's strange beauty. Sunrise over the Kelso Dunes, Joshua trees silhouetted against star-filled skies, and the way the mountains change color throughout the day from purple to red to gold. There's something almost spiritual about the vastness and silence of the Mojave. But that same isolation can be terrifying when things go wrong. The desert has moods. Some days it feels welcoming and peaceful, with perfect visibility and comfortable temperatures. Other days it feels hostile and dangerous, with sudden weather changes, equipment failures, and a sense that something is watching you from the empty spaces between the mountains. My shift on August 8, 2023, started like any other Tuesday evening. I reported for duty at 6 p.m. at the CHP office in Barstow, which serves as headquarters for Desert Patrol operations covering Interstate 15, Interstate 40, and various state routes throughout San Bernardino County. The office is located in a single-story building, constructed in the 1980s, designed to withstand extreme temperatures and occasional high winds. It's surrounded by desert landscaping and solar panels that help offset the massive air conditioning costs during summer months. The weather forecast that day called for clear skies and temperatures reaching 115 degrees, typical for August in the Mojave. Evening shifts are actually preferable during summer months because temperatures drop significantly after sunset, making it safer for both officers and motorists to be outside their vehicles. During the shift briefing, Sergeant Mike Torres reviewed the usual concerns for Desert Patrol. Sergeant Torres had been working desert routes for 18 years and understood the unique challenges of policing in extreme environments. He was known for his thorough briefings and emphasis on officer safety. The briefing covered increased traffic due to summer vacation travel, ongoing construction projects that were creating traffic bottlenecks near Victorville, and warnings about illegal border crossers who sometimes attempt to traverse the desert on foot. The Border Patrol had requested increased vigilance for abandoned vehicles and suspicious activity near remote highway exits. There had also been reports of unusual vehicle breakdowns along a specific stretch of Interstate 15 between Baker and the Nevada state line. Over the past month, multiple motorists had called in reporting sudden engine failures, electrical problems, and other mechanical issues that seemed to occur without warning in the same general area. We've had 17 reports of vehicle breakdowns between mile markers 90 and 110 in the past 4 weeks, Sergeant Torres said. That's more than double the normal rate for that stretch of highway. The maintenance department had inspected the roadway and found no obvious hazards. Road surface was in good condition, signage was proper, and there were no construction zones or other factors that might contribute to increased breakdown rates. The California Department of Transportation had checked for electromagnetic interference from nearby military installations, including Edwards Air Force Base and the China Lake Naval Weapons Center. Their equipment showed normal readings with no unusual electromagnetic activity. The incidents were being attributed to the extreme heat affecting vehicle performance, which was a reasonable explanation given the record-breaking temperatures we'd been experiencing. August 2023 was shaping up to be one of the hottest on record for the Mojave Desert. Most likely explanation is that the heat is pushing marginal vehicles past their limits, Sergeant Torres concluded. But keep your eyes open for any patterns or unusual circumstances. My assigned patrol sector that evening was Interstate 15, northbound from Barstow to the Nevada border. Approximately 110 miles of highway that includes some of the most remote and challenging terrain in California. This sector encompasses the small communities of Baker and Nipton, along with vast stretches of empty desert where the nearest services can be 50 miles away. Baker is essentially an oasis in the desert, built around the intersection of Interstate 15 and Highway 127. It's famous for its giant thermometer that displays the current temperature, often showing readings that tourists can't believe are real. The town exists primarily to serve travelers with gas, food, and lodging before they head into the emptiest parts of the Mojave. North of Baker, the landscape becomes increasingly desolate. The highway climbs through mountain passes and descends into valleys where the only signs of human presence are the road itself, and occasional ranch gates leading to properties that might be 100 miles from the nearest neighbor. The sector also includes several areas known for unusual phenomena that locals tend to avoid discussing with outsiders. Truck drivers and longtime desert residents sometimes mention strange lights in the sky, unexplained radio interference, and vehicles that seem to experience problems in specific locations. Most law enforcement officers dismiss these reports as heat mirages, equipment malfunctions, or the psychological effects of desert isolation. After 12 years of desert patrol, I've learned to distinguish between genuine anomalies and the tricks that extreme environments can play on perception and equipment. I began my patrol around 6:30 p.m., driving north from Barstow toward Baker. Traffic was moderate for a Tuesday evening. A mix of commercial trucks making scheduled runs to Las Vegas, tourists heading to Nevada casinos, and local residents traveling between desert communities. The late afternoon heat was still intense, creating shimmering mirages on the asphalt that made it look like there was water covering the highway. These heat mirages are common in the desert and can be disorienting for drivers who aren't familiar with the phenomenon. Everything seemed normal during the first 2 hours of my patrol. I conducted routine speed enforcement near Zesix Road, a turnoff that leads to a former health resort now used as a desert research station by California State. I assisted a motorist with an overheated radiator near the Mojave National Preserve entrance, helping them get their vehicle to a safe location and calling for roadside assistance. I also responded to a minor traffic accident at the Baker exit where a tourist from Ohio had rear-ended a commercial truck while distracted by the giant thermometer that serves as Baker's main landmark. The accident was minor, but it required about 40 minutes to clear the scene and complete the paperwork. The first unusual incident occurred around 8:45 p.m., just as the sun was setting behind the mountains to the west. I was parked at a rest area about 20 miles north of Baker, completing paperwork from the traffic accident and monitoring radio traffic for any emergency calls. The rest area is one of the few places along this stretch of Interstate 15 where travelers can stop for fuel, food, and restrooms. It's essentially an oasis in the desert, with palm trees, grass, and even a small pond that's maintained by groundwater springs. During summer months, it's a crucial stop for motorists who underestimate the dangers of desert travel. The facility was built in the 1970s and expanded in the 90s to accommodate increased traffic. It includes a gas station, convenience store, restaurant, and motel. There's also a small visitor center with information about desert wildlife and safety tips for desert driving. I noticed a dark blue sedan pull into the rest area and park near the restrooms. The vehicle appeared to be a late-model Toyota Camry with Nevada license plates. Nothing unusual about that, since plenty of Las Vegas residents travel this route regularly for work or to visit family in Southern California. But as I watched, I noticed that the driver never got out of the car. The vehicle just sat there with the engine running and the air conditioning presumably working to combat the heat. After about 10 minutes, I decided to check on the occupant to make sure they weren't experiencing a medical emergency. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke are serious concerns in the desert, especially for elderly motorists or people with medical conditions. I've responded to several calls where people became overcome by heat while their vehicles were running normally, sometimes because their air conditioning failed or they didn't recognize the symptoms of heat-related illness. I approached the vehicle and tapped on the driver's side window. Inside, I could see a woman who appeared to be in her 50s, with short gray hair and wearing a white blouse. She looked up at me with an expression of confusion and fear. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I asked as she rolled down the window. "Officer," she said, "I think I'm lost. I've been driving for hours, but I can't find the exit I'm looking for." "What exit are you trying to reach?" "Interstate 15 north to Las Vegas. I live in Henderson, and I was visiting friends in Los Angeles. But I can't find the right highway." I was confused by her response. "Ma'am, you're on Interstate 15 northbound right now. Las Vegas is about 90 miles ahead of you." She stared at me with growing distress. "That's impossible." I've been driving north for 6 hours, and I keep ending up back here. Back here, at this same rest stop. I've stopped here 4 times tonight, trying to get directions, but every time I leave and continue north, I end up right back here again. I studied her more closely. She didn't appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and she seemed mentally competent. Her speech was clear, her movements were coordinated, and she showed no obvious signs of impairment. But what she was describing made no sense. Interstate 15 runs straight north from this point to Las Vegas with no loops or circular routes that would bring someone back to the same location. "Ma'am, may I see your driver's license?" She handed me her license, which identified her as Janet Walsh, age 54, with an address in Henderson, Nevada. The license appeared to be legitimate and was current, expiring in 2025. "Mrs. Walsh, when did you leave Los Angeles?" "Around 2 p.m. It should be a 4-hour drive to Las Vegas, but it's almost 9 p.m. and I'm still not there." I checked my watch. 8:50 p.m. If she had left Los Angeles at 2 p.m., she should have reached Las Vegas hours ago, assuming she took the most direct route via Interstate 10 to Interstate 15. "Mrs. Walsh, did you make any stops along the way?" "Just for gas in Barstow around 3:30. Then I got on Interstate 15 north, and I've been driving ever since. But I keep ending up here." I was beginning to suspect that Mrs. Walsh was experiencing some kind of medical issue that was affecting her perception or memory. Heat exhaustion can cause confusion and disorientation, and it's possible she had been driving in circles without realizing it due to impaired judgment. Dehydration and heat stress can also cause memory problems and confusion about time and location. I've seen cases where people became so disoriented by heat that they couldn't remember basic information like their destination or how long they had been driving. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm going to call for medical assistance. I think you might be experiencing heat-related illness." "I'm not sick," she said. "I've been drinking water, and my car's air conditioning is working fine. Something is wrong with this highway. I've been driving the same stretch over and over, but I can't get past this point." Before I could respond, my radio crackled with a call. "All units, we have a report of a stranded motorist on Interstate 15, northbound, mile marker 105, requesting assistance." Mile marker 105 was about 15 miles north of my current location, near the Nevada border. I needed to respond to the call, but I was also concerned about Mrs. Walsh and her apparent confusion about her location. "Mrs. Walsh, I need to respond to an emergency call. I want you to follow me north to the next exit, and we'll get you to a medical facility where they can check you out." "I've already tried driving north," she said. "I'll just end up back here again." "Trust me, Mrs. Walsh, I'll make sure you get where you need to go." I got back in my patrol car and waited for her to pull out of the parking space. She followed me as we merged onto Interstate 15 northbound. I kept her vehicle in sight in my rearview mirror as we drove toward mile marker 105. The highway in this area runs straight for miles with gentle curves around low hills. Visibility is excellent except during dust storms or rare fog events. There are no confusing intersections or exits that might cause someone to become disoriented. But about 10 miles north of the rest area, I noticed something strange. Mrs. Walsh's car was no longer behind me. I looked in my mirrors and could see no sign of her vehicle anywhere on the highway. I immediately slowed down and checked my mirrors again. The highway behind me was empty except for a distant commercial truck that was at least 2 miles back. Mrs. Walsh's blue Toyota Camry had simply vanished. I radioed dispatch immediately. 7, Adam 42 to dispatch. I need assistance locating a Nevada-licensed Toyota Camry that was following my unit northbound on Interstate 15. Vehicle appears to have disappeared from the roadway. 7, Adam 42. Can you describe the circumstances?" I explained the situation with Mrs. Walsh and her claims about driving in circles, as well as the sudden disappearance of her vehicle from behind my patrol car. Dispatch confirmed that there had been no reports of accidents or breakdowns in the area, and no other units had observed the vehicle I described. 7 Adam 42. Are you certain the vehicle was following you? Could it have taken an exit or turned around without you noticing? Dispatch. There are no exits between the rest area and my current location. I had clear visual contact with the vehicle until it disappeared. I continued north to respond to the stranded motorist call, but I couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Walsh. How does a car just disappear from a straight stretch of highway with excellent visibility? I arrived at mile marker 105 and found a California Highway Patrol tow truck already on scene with a disabled semi-truck. The truck driver, a man named Carlos Rivera, had experienced a complete electrical failure that left his rig stranded in the right lane. Carlos was the experienced driver who had been hauling freight between Los Angeles and Las Vegas for 15 years. He knew this route better than most people know the streets in their own neighborhoods. "Officer Mitchell," Carlos said as I approached, "I think there's something wrong with this stretch of highway. This is the third electrical failure I've had here in the past month." "Third time? Same exact location, same type of failure. All my electrical systems just shut down for no reason. No warning lights, no gradual failure, just complete electrical death." I helped coordinate the tow truck operation and got Carlos's truck moved to a safe location off the highway. But his comments about repeated electrical failures in the same area reminded me of the briefing reports about unusual vehicle breakdowns. "Carlos, have you reported these previous failures to CHP or DOT?" "Sure have, but they can't find anything wrong with the truck or the highway. My mechanic has been over this rig 3 times, and it runs fine everywhere else." After the tow truck left with Carlos's semi, I decided to drive back south to the rest area where I had encountered Mrs. Walsh. I wanted to see if her vehicle had somehow returned there, or if there were any clues about what had happened to her. The drive back to the rest area took about 20 minutes. As I pulled into the parking lot, I immediately saw the dark blue Toyota Camry parked in the exact same spot where I had first encountered it. The engine was running, and I could see Mrs. Walsh sitting in the driver's seat. I approached the vehicle again and tapped on the window. Mrs. Walsh looked up at me with the same expression of confusion and fear I had seen before. "Officer," she said, "I think I'm lost. I've been driving for hours, but I can't find the exit I'm looking for." She gave me the exact same explanation she had given before, word for word, as if she were reading from a script. When I asked to see her license, it was identical to the one she had shown me earlier. "Mrs. Walsh," I said carefully, "do you remember talking to me about 30 minutes ago?" She stared at me blankly. "No, officer, this is the first time I've seen you." I felt a chill despite the desert heat. Either Mrs. Walsh was experiencing severe memory loss, or something very strange was happening on this stretch of highway. "Mrs. Walsh, I want you to follow me again. We're going to drive north together, and I'm going to make sure you reach Las Vegas safely." We repeated the same procedure as before. I led her north on Interstate 15, keeping her vehicle in sight in my rearview mirror. But just like before, her car disappeared from the highway after about 10 miles. This time, I immediately turned around and drove back to the rest area. Sure enough, the blue Toyota Camry was parked in the same spot, with Mrs. Walsh sitting inside looking confused and lost. I was now convinced that something was seriously wrong, but I wasn't sure if the problem was medical, mechanical, or something else entirely. The fact that Mrs. Walsh seemed to have no memory of our previous encounters suggested possible neurological issues or severe heat exhaustion. I radioed dispatch and requested backup and medical assistance. 7 Adam 42 to dispatch. I need supervisor response and paramedics to the rest area at mile marker 97. I have a motorist who appears to be experiencing severe disorientation and possible memory loss. 7 Adam 42 units en route. ETA approximately 45 minutes. While waiting for backup, I tried a different approach with Mrs. Walsh. Instead of having her follow me, I asked her to describe exactly what happened when she tried to drive north. I get on the highway and drive toward Las Vegas, she said. The road is straight and easy to follow, but after about 20 or 30 minutes, I find myself back here. I don't remember turning around or exiting the highway. I just end up back at this rest stop. Do you remember anything specific about the drive? Any landmarks or signs you see? There's a sign for something called Zazek's Road, and then there's a long straight stretch through the desert. After that, everything gets fuzzy. Next thing I know, I'm pulling into this parking lot again. I knew the stretch of highway she was describing. It was the same route I'd been driving all evening, and there was nothing unusual about it. Just a straight, well-maintained section of Interstate 15 through typical Mojave Desert terrain. Mrs. Walsh, have you been feeling ill? Any nausea, dizziness, or confusion before this started? I felt fine when I left Los Angeles. Maybe a little tired, but nothing unusual. I've made this drive dozens of times without any problems. Sergeant Torres arrived about 40 minutes later, followed by paramedics from San Bernardino County Fire Department. I briefed them on the situation with Mrs. Walsh and the repeated disappearances of her vehicle. The paramedics examined Mrs. Walsh thoroughly and found no signs of heat exhaustion, dehydration, or other medical issues. Her vital signs were normal. Her blood pressure was within acceptable ranges, and she appeared to be mentally competent. Her temperature was normal, pupils were responsive, and she showed no signs of confusion except regarding her location and the time she had been driving. Blood oxygen levels were good, and she had no symptoms of heat-related illness. Mrs. Walsh, Sergeant Torres said, "We're going to have one of our officers escort you all the way to Las Vegas. We'll make sure you get home safely." "That won't work," she said. "I've already tried following a police car. I just end up back here." Sergeant Torres looked at me with a puzzled expression. I explained about my 2 previous attempts to escort Mrs. Walsh north, and how her vehicle had disappeared from the highway both times. "Officer Mitchell, are you certain the vehicle disappeared? Could it have taken an exit or turned around without you noticing?" "Sergeant, there are no exits between the rest area and where the vehicle disappeared. It's a straight stretch of highway with excellent visibility. The car was there one moment and gone the next." Sergeant Torres decided to try the escort procedure himself. He had Mrs. Walsh follow his patrol car while I followed behind her. We drove north on Interstate 15, maintaining visual contact with all 3 vehicles. I was in constant radio contact with Sergeant Torres, describing everything I observed. Mrs. Walsh's blue Toyota Camry was clearly visible between our 2 patrol cars, maintaining a steady speed and staying in the proper lane. But just like before, Mrs. Walsh's car vanished after about 10 miles. One moment it was between Sergeant Torres and me, the next moment it was gone. We both immediately stopped and searched the area, but found no trace of the vehicle or any explanation for its disappearance. There were no side roads, no places where a vehicle could leave the highway, and no evidence of an accident. The car had simply ceased to exist as far as our perception was concerned. We drove back to the rest area and once again found Mrs. Walsh parked in the same spot, with no memory of the escort attempt. "This is impossible," Sergeant Torres said. "Cars don't just disappear from highways." We tried the procedure one more time, this time with both patrol cars maintaining constant radio contact and describing everything we observed. The result was identical. Mrs. Walsh's vehicle vanished from the highway after about 10 miles, and we found her back at the rest area with no memory of the attempt. 7 Adam 42 and 7 Adam 21 to dispatch. Sergeant Torres radioed. We need additional supervisor response and possibly psychological evaluation for a motorist who appears to be experiencing severe disorientation. By now, it was after midnight, and we had been dealing with this situation for over 3 hours. Sergeant Torres made the decision to have Mrs. Walsh's vehicle towed to a garage in Baker for mechanical inspection. Mrs. Walsh, he said, we think there might be a problem with your car that's causing these incidents. We're going to have it checked by a mechanic, and we'll arrange for you to stay at a motel tonight. Can I call my family? She asked. They'll be worried when I don't come home. I offered to contact her family in Henderson and explain that she was safe, but would be delayed. But when I called the number she provided, I got a recording saying the number was no longer in service. I asked Mrs. Walsh for an alternate number, but she insisted that was the only contact information she had. A check of Henderson City records showed no Janet Walsh at the address listed on her driver's license. Sergeant Torres and I exchanged concerned looks. Either Mrs. Walsh was providing false information, or there was something wrong with our ability to verify her identity. The tow truck arrived around 1 a.m. and loaded Mrs. Walsh's Toyota Camry. I drove her to the Desert Inn Motel in Baker and helped her check in for the night. She seemed relieved to be off the highway, but still confused about what had been happening. Officer Mitchell, she said as I was leaving, I know this sounds crazy, but I don't think that highway wants me to leave. What do you mean? I've been driving the same roads for 40 years, and I've never experienced anything like this. It's like something is keeping me trapped on that stretch of Interstate 15. I told her to get some rest and that we would have answers for her in the morning. But as I drove back to my patrol sector, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Walsh might be right about something keeping her trapped. I spent the rest of my shift driving the same stretch of a highway where Mrs. Walsh had disappeared multiple times. I was looking for any clues about what might cause a vehicle to vanish, but everything appeared normal. The road surface was in good condition with proper striping and signage. There were no unusual electromagnetic readings on my equipment, and visibility was excellent under the clear desert sky. Radio communications were normal, and my GPS showed accurate location data. Around 4 a.m., I received another call about a stranded motorist near mile marker 105, the same location where I had found Carlos Rivera's disabled truck earlier in the evening. When I arrived, I found a white pickup truck stopped on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. The driver was standing outside the vehicle, looking frustrated and confused. "Officer," he said as I approached, "my truck just died. All the electrical systems shut down at once." The driver was Mark Stevens, a construction worker from Las Vegas who was returning home from a job in Los Angeles. His description of the electrical failure was identical to what Carlos Rivera had experienced. "Mr. Stevens, has this happened before?" "Actually, yes. Same stretch of highway, same type of failure. This is the third time in 2 months." I was beginning to see a pattern. The same location, the same type of vehicle failures, and now Mrs. Walsh's repeated disappearances. Something was definitely happening on this stretch of Interstate 15. I called for a tow truck and helped Mr. Stevens arrange for transportation to Las Vegas. But as we waited, he told me something that made my blood run cold. "Officer Mitchell, there's something else. When my truck died the first time, I was talking to my wife on my cell phone. But when I called her back from the tow truck, she said I had never called. She had no record of any incoming calls from my number." "What do you mean?" "It's like the phone call never happened. but I remember talking to her for at least 10 minutes before the truck died. We were discussing what to make for dinner when I got home. I thought about Mrs. Walsh and her claims that she'd been driving in circles. What if she wasn't confused or experiencing memory loss? What if something on this highway was actually causing people to repeat the same actions over and over? After Mr. Stevens was safely on his way to Las Vegas, I spent the rest of my shift researching reports of unusual incidents on Interstate 15. What I found was disturbing. Over the past year, there had been dozens of reports of vehicles experiencing unexplained electrical failures in the same general area. Multiple reports of motorists who claimed to have driven the same stretch of highway repeatedly without making progress. And several cases of people who seemed to disappear from the highway entirely, only to be found later with no memory of what had happened. Most of these reports had been dismissed as heat-related hallucinations, equipment malfunctions, or driver error. But the pattern was too consistent to ignore. I also found historical records dating back to the 1950s, when Interstate 15 was first constructed through this area. There had been reports of construction equipment that would mysteriously fail in certain locations, workers who would become disoriented and lost despite working on straight sections of highway, and unexplained delays in construction that couldn't be attributed to weather or equipment problems. Some of the older reports mentioned Native American legends about this area of the Mojave Desert. According to these stories, there were places where the spirits of the dead would become trapped, unable to move on to the next world. The construction of the highway had apparently disturbed one of these locations. My shift ended at 6 a.m., but I decided to check on Mrs. Walsh before heading home. I drove to the Desert Inn in Baker and found her in the motel restaurant, having breakfast and looking much more alert than she had the night before. "Officer Mitchell," she said when she saw me, "I've been thinking about what happened last night. I know it sounds impossible, but I think something on that highway was making me repeat the same drive over and over." "What makes you think that?" "I've been calling my family all morning, and they're telling me I never left Los Angeles yesterday. According to them, I called around 2 p.m. to say I was leaving, but they never heard from me again. They were about to file a missing person report." I felt a chill. "Mrs. Walsh, what's the last thing you remember before finding yourself at the rest stop?" "I remember getting on Interstate 15 in Barstow around 3 p.m. I remember stopping for gas and checking my map. After that, everything is a blur until I found myself parked at that rest area talking to you. That means you lost about 6 hours. And according to my family, I lost an entire day. They think I left Los Angeles on Monday, but you found me Tuesday night." I stared at her. Either Mrs. Walsh was experiencing severe memory loss, or something on Interstate 15 had caused her to lose an entire day of her life. The mechanic's report on her vehicle only added to the mystery. According to the garage in Baker, her Toyota Camry was in perfect mechanical condition. There were no electrical problems, no engine issues, and no explanation for why it would have failed to complete the journey to Las Vegas. But there was one strange detail. The odometer showed that the vehicle had traveled over 300 miles since leaving Los Angeles, even though the distance from Los Angeles to the rest area where I found her was only about 200 miles. That extra 100 miles, the mechanic told me, could represent several trips back and forth on the same stretch of highway, like she was driving in circles for hours. I helped Mrs. Walsh arrange for a rental car and escort to Las Vegas, making sure to use Highway 95 instead of Interstate 15. She reached her home safely and called to confirm her arrival. But her case was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, I received multiple reports of similar incidents on the same stretch of Interstate 15. Motorists who lost time, vehicles that experienced unexplained failures, and people who claimed to have driven the same section of highway repeatedly without making progress. The official response from CHP headquarters was to attribute these incidents to the extreme heat, driver fatigue, and the psychological effects of desert driving. Additional patrols were assigned to the area, and warning signs were posted about the dangers of desert travel. But the incidents continued, and they seemed to be getting worse. 3 weeks after my encounter with Mrs. Walsh, I responded to a call about multiple vehicles stopped on Interstate 15 near mile marker 100. When I arrived, I found 5 cars and 2 trucks all stopped in the middle of the highway, with their drivers standing outside looking confused and disoriented. "Officer," one of the drivers said, "we've all been driving in circles for hours. Every time we try to continue north, we end up back in the same location." All 7 drivers had similar stories. They had been traveling from Southern California to Las Vegas when they became trapped in what they described as a loop. They would drive north for 20 or 30 minutes, then somehow find themselves back at the same point on the highway. The drivers included a family from Phoenix returning from Disneyland, a couple from San Diego heading to a wedding in Las Vegas, a truck driver hauling electronics from Los Angeles to Denver, and several other travelers with no connection to each other. I called for backup and medical assistance, but the paramedics found no signs of heat exhaustion or other medical issues. The vehicles were all in good mechanical condition, and their GPS systems showed normal readings, but there was no logical explanation for how 7 different drivers could all experience the same impossible phenomenon. The drivers were eventually escorted off Interstate 15 using alternate routes, and they all reached their destinations safely. But their vehicles' GPS systems showed impossible travel patterns, loops and circles that covered hundreds of miles in areas where the highway runs straight for dozens of miles. After this incident, I requested a meeting with my supervisors to discuss the pattern of unusual reports from Interstate 15. I presented all the evidence I had gathered, including Mrs. Walsh's case, the repeated electrical failures, and the multiple driver reports of being trapped in loops. Captain Rodriguez listened to my presentation but ultimately concluded that we were dealing with a series of coincidental equipment failures and heat-related incidents. He ordered additional water and shade stations along the highway, increased patrols during peak heat hours, and better training for officers on recognizing heat exhaustion. "Officer Mitchell, I understand your concern, but we need to stick to logical explanations. The desert is a harsh environment that can affect both people and equipment in unexpected ways." But I knew it was more than that. Something was happening on Interstate 15 that couldn't be explained by conventional means. 2 months later, I had my own experience with the phenomenon. I was patrolling the same stretch of a highway on a cool October evening when I received a call about a disabled vehicle near mile marker 105. The same location where I had found multiple stranded motorists over the past few months. When I arrived, I found a woman named Lisa Martinez standing next to her broken-down Honda Accord. She was a nurse from Los Angeles who had been driving to Las Vegas for a wedding. "Officer," she said, "my car just stopped running." All the dashboard lights went out, and the engine died. Lisa was a 32-year-old emergency room nurse at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She had been making the drive between Los Angeles and Las Vegas regularly for 3 years to visit her fiancé, who worked as a dealer at one of the casinos. I helped her call for a tow truck and offered to give her a ride to the nearest gas station in Baker. But as we drove south toward Baker, I noticed something strange. The mile markers were going backward. We had started at mile marker 105 and were driving south, but the mile markers were showing increasing numbers instead of decreasing ones. This was impossible. Mile markers on Interstate 15 are numbered sequentially from south to north. Driving south from mile marker 105 should take us past markers 104, 103, and so on. "Officer Mitchell, Lisa said from the passenger seat. "How long have we been driving?" I checked my watch. "About 15 minutes. That's impossible. Look at your dashboard clock." I looked at the clock display in my patrol car. It showed that 3 hours and 27 minutes had passed since we started driving. "That can't be right," I said. "My watch shows 15 minutes." But as I spoke, I realized that the sun had moved significantly across the sky. When we started driving, it had been late afternoon with the sun high in the western sky. Now it appeared to be evening, with the sun much lower on the horizon. I stopped the patrol car and tried to radio dispatch, but got only static in response. I checked my GPS unit, and it showed that we were traveling in a large circle, even though we had been driving straight south on Interstate 15. "Officer Mitchell," Lisa said, "I think we're trapped in the same thing that happened to me before." Before? This isn't the first time my car has broken down on this highway. It's happened 3 times in the past 6 months, always in the same location. And every time I lose hours of time that I can't account for. I felt the same chill I had experienced during my encounter with Mrs. Walsh. We were experiencing the same phenomenon that had trapped dozens of other motorists on this stretch of highway. "Lisa, what do you remember about the previous incidents?" "The first time was in April. I was driving to Las Vegas for my birthday when my car died at mile marker 105. A CHP officer gave me a ride, but instead of reaching Baker in 20 minutes, we somehow drove for 4 hours and ended up back where we started." "What about the second time?" "June. Same location, same electrical failure. This time I called my fiancé to pick me up, but when he arrived 6 hours later, he said I had called him the day before. According to him, I had been missing for over 24 hours. I made the decision to stop trying to drive to Baker and instead head east away from Interstate 15. I took the first exit I could find and drove inland toward the town of Needles. As soon as we left the immediate area of Interstate 15, my radio started working again. My GPS showed normal readings, and the time discrepancy between my watch and dashboard clock disappeared. I called dispatch and reported our situation, but I struggled to explain what had happened without sounding like I was having a mental breakdown. 7 Adam 42 to dispatch. I need backup and supervisor response to my location. I've experienced equipment malfunctions and possible time distortion while responding to a disabled vehicle call. 7 Adam 42, can you clarify the nature of the equipment malfunctions? Dispatch, my GPS showed impossible readings, dashboard clock showed incorrect time, and radio communications were down. I'm currently east of Interstate 15 near Needles, and all systems are now functioning normally. Lisa and I reached Needles safely, and she was able to arrange for her vehicle to be towed to a repair shop. Like all the previous cases, the mechanic found nothing wrong with her car. It started normally and ran perfectly, but her experience matched the pattern I had been documenting for months. The same location, the same type of failures, and the same time distortions that defied logical explanation. "Officer Mitchell," Lisa said as we waited for her ride to arrive, "I've been researching this phenomenon online. There are forums where people discuss similar experiences on highways across the country." "What kind of experiences?" "Time loops, vehicles that vanish and reappear, electrical failures in specific locations. Some people call them highway anomalies or temporal distortions." She showed me several websites on her phone that contained reports from motorists who claimed to have experienced impossible events on various highways. Most of the reports were dismissed as hoaxes or hallucinations, but some contained details that were eerily similar to what we had been experiencing on Interstate 15. After this incident, I requested a transfer to a different patrol sector. I told my supervisors that I wanted experience on different types of highways, but The real reason was that I no longer felt safe patrolling that stretch of Interstate 15. My transfer was approved, and I now patrol Interstate 40 through the eastern Mojave Desert. But I continue to monitor radio traffic from Interstate 15, and the reports of unusual incidents continue. Every few weeks, there's another call about vehicles experiencing unexplained failures near mile marker 105. Motorists who claim to have driven in circles for hours. People who lose time and have no memory of how they ended up in certain locations. The official explanation remains the same: heat-related incidents, equipment malfunctions, and driver error. But those of us who have experienced these phenomena know better. There's something on that stretch of Interstate 15 that doesn't follow normal rules. Something that can trap vehicles and their occupants in temporal loops, cause unexplained mechanical failures, and make people lose hours or even days of their lives. I've researched the history of the area extensively, looking for clues about what might have caused this phenomenon. What I've found suggests that the construction of Interstate 15 may have disturbed something that should have been left alone. The highway was built through an area that Native American tribes considered sacred and dangerous. According to their oral histories, it was a place where the spirits of the dead would become trapped, unable to move on to the next world. The Kemehuevi and Mojave tribes both have legends about this area. They describe it as a place where time moves differently, where the living and the dead exist in the same space, and where travelers can become lost between worlds. When construction crews blasted through rock formations and graded the desert floor in the 1950s, they may have damaged whatever natural barriers kept these spiritual forces contained. The result is a stretch of highway where the normal laws of time and space don't always apply. But whether this explanation has any basis in reality, I can't say. What I know for certain is that Interstate 15 between mile markers 90 and 110 is not a normal highway. Since my transfer, I've been contacted by several other CHP officers who have had similar experiences on that stretch of highway. We've formed an informal support group, meeting monthly to discuss cases and share information. Officer Karen Webb worked Coastal Patrol before transferring to Desert Routes in 2022. She reported multiple incidents of vehicles that would appear and disappear without explanation, always in the same general area. I've been a cop for 18 years, she told me, and I've never seen anything like what happens on that highway. Cars that vanish from your sight while you're looking directly at them. Motorists who claim to have been driving for days, but only remember starting their trip. Officer Tom Bradley has been with CHP for 25 years and has worked every type of patrol assignment in California. He was initially skeptical of reports about anomalies on Interstate 15 until he experienced them himself. I was escorting a disabled vehicle to Baker when both our cars just disappeared from the highway, he said. One minute we were driving south, the next minute we were sitting in the parking lot of a gas station with no memory of how we got there. What's most disturbing is that the incidents seem to be increasing in frequency and severity. In 2023, we documented over 100 reports of unusual events on that stretch of a highway. In 2024, the number has already exceeded 150. The CHP has quietly assigned additional resources to the area, but the official position remains that these are isolated incidents caused by environmental factors and human error. However, I've learned that there are ongoing studies being conducted by various government agencies. The Department of Transportation has installed specialized monitoring equipment along the highway. The National Weather Service has placed additional atmospheric sensors in the area, and there are persistent rumors about military involvement in investigating the phenomena. What I can tell you is that if you're ever traveling Interstate 15 between Barstow and Las Vegas, be careful. Don't stop unless absolutely necessary. Keep your fuel tank full and your cell phone charged. And if you start experiencing mechanical problems or time distortions, get off the highway as quickly as possible and seek help. The desert is beautiful but dangerous, and some places are too hazardous for the living. Interstate 15. Between mile markers 90 and 110 is definitely one of those places. I still love my job as a CHP officer, and I'm proud to serve the communities of the Mojave Desert. But I'll never forget the months I spent patrolling that haunted stretch of highway and the people who are still trapped there. Because they are still there. Every few weeks, someone reports seeing the same vehicles driving in circles on Interstate 15. The same drivers who have been missing for months or years, trapped in temporal loops that they can't escape. Janet Walsh, Lisa Martinez, Carlos Rivera, Mark Stevens, and dozens of others. Still driving the same stretch of a highway, still looking for a way home that they'll never find. Caught forever in the space between destinations, in a part of the desert where time moves in circles instead of straight lines. The highway remembers everyone who has ever been trapped there, and it's always hungry for more. Last month, I received a call from a colleague who still patrols Interstate 15. Officer Jennifer Chen has been working that sector for 2 years and has become the unofficial expert on anomalous incidents. "Mitchell, we've got a new development," she said. "The phenomena are spreading. We're now getting reports of similar incidents on Highway 127 north of Baker and on Interstate 40 east of Barstow." This news was deeply troubling. If whatever was causing the anomalies on Interstate 15 was spreading to other highways, it could potentially affect thousands of additional motorists. Any theories on why it's spreading? The geologists think it might be related to underground water systems. This whole area sits on top of ancient lake beds and underground rivers. If something is affecting the geological structure, it could be expanding along these underground water channels. I've also learned that similar incidents have been reported on highways in Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, always in desert areas, always involving the same types of phenomena. Time distortions, vehicle disappearances, and people who become trapped in loops. There's clearly something about desert environments that makes these anomalies possible. Whether it's the geological structure, electromagnetic properties, or something else entirely, the American Southwest seems to be particularly susceptible to these temporal disturbances. The most recent incident I'm aware of occurred just 2 weeks ago. A family of 4 from San Diego was driving to Las Vegas for vacation when their SUV experienced electrical failure at mile marker 105. When CHP officers arrived on scene, they found the vehicle but no sign of the family. A search of the area revealed no tracks, no evidence of where the people might have gone, and no explanation for their disappearance. 3 days later, the family was found at a gas station in Baker, confused and disoriented. They claimed to have no memory of the past 3 days, and their last clear recollection was of their car breaking down on the highway. Medical examination revealed no signs of injury, drug use, or psychological trauma, but their clothing showed evidence of prolonged exposure to desert conditions, and they were severely dehydrated despite having no memory of being lost in the desert. This case is particularly disturbing because it involves children. Previous incidents had primarily affected adult travelers, but now entire families are being caught in these temporal anomalies. The official investigation concluded that the family had become disoriented due to heat exhaustion and had wandered in the desert before eventually finding their way to Baker. But this explanation doesn't account for their complete memory loss or the fact that their vehicle was found in a different location than where they claimed it had broken down. I've been following this case closely because it represents a significant escalation in the phenomena. If families with children are now being affected, the potential for tragedy is much greater. Children are more vulnerable to dehydration and heat exposure than adults. If a family becomes trapped in one of these temporal loops, the children might not survive the experience even if the adults eventually escape. This is why I continue to speak out about the anomalies on Interstate 15, despite the official position that they don't exist. People need to know about the dangers, especially families traveling with children. The desert is unforgiving under the best of circumstances. When you add inexplicable phenomena that can trap people in time loops or cause them to lose days of their lives, it becomes truly dangerous. I've prepared a detailed report documenting all the incidents I'm aware of, along with recommendations for additional research and safety measures. I've submitted this report to CHP headquarters, the Department of Transportation, and several federal agencies. Most have acknowledged receipt of the report, but have taken no action. The official position remains that these incidents are caused by environmental factors and human error. But I know the truth. There's something on Interstate 15 that exists outside normal understanding of time and space. Something that can reach out and grab unwary travelers, trapping them in endless loops or making them vanish entirely. Until someone in authority is willing to acknowledge this truth and take action to protect the public, I'll continue to document these incidents and warn people about the dangers. The highway remembers everything. Every person who has ever been trapped there. Every moment of confusion and terror. Every desperate attempt to escape. And it's still hungry for more. If you must travel Interstate 15 through the Mojave Desert, please be careful. Stay alert, keep your vehicle in good repair, and don't ignore warning signs that something isn't right. Because once the highway has you, it doesn't like to let go. And some journeys never end.